Welcome to NTD News Today.
Here are today's top stories.
President Biden arriving at the G7 summit in Italy, where he's pushing for frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. More on a new security agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine, and the latest in U.S. sanctions targeting China and Russia.
Russian warships docked at a port in Cuba, roughly 90 miles from Florida. Russia's military says the fleet was holding drills for long-range strikes. We have reactions from the U.S.
Record-setting rain and life-threatening flooding. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declares an emergency across areas in South Florida, and forecasters say more rain is on the way.
The U.S. military looks to de-escalate tensions between Israel and Lebanon and says it doesn't want a wider regional conflict. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Hamas wants some unworkable changes to a U.S.-backed ceasefire plan. We have updates on the conflict.
Amid the war in Gaza and renewed college campus protests, lawmakers want answers from university leadership about the rise of anti-Semitism on campus.
A Croatian town builds a monument honoring its immigrant history. A life-size sculpture of a Mercedes-Benz shows the car's local significance and status.
This is NTD News Today, live from our NTD Global Headquarters. Here are Stephania Cox and Chris Beers.
Hi there, I'm Kevin Hogan, sitting in for Chris Beers today.
And to begin the show, mingling with G7 leaders in Italy, President Biden is seeking to secure a deal to unlock frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine.
He's also announcing a new security agreement that commits the U.S. to long-term support for Ukraine. NTD's Iris Tao has more from Bari, Italy.
President Biden arriving at the G7 summit here in Italy, where leaders of the world's 7 leading economies are hoping to show unity on issues like countering Russia and China and supporting Ukraine. Atop Biden's agenda is to get leaders on board with a plan to send Ukraine a $50 billion loan using interest generated by frozen Russian assets. The White House said this morning,
I think we are on the verge of a good outcome here.
And today, Biden's also signing a new security agreement with Ukraine in which the U.S. will pledge
our support will last long into the future and pledging continued cooperation, particularly in the defense and security space.
It comes right after the U.S. on Wednesday announced a slew of new sanctions aimed at stopping countries like China from supplying Russia with materials used in the war against Ukraine.
Whether it's industrial materials or microelectronics or UAV parts or whatever it may be.
In addition to China's support for Russia, leaders here will also talk about China's unfair trade practices, including China's industrial overcapacity that threatens global markets. The White House is also welcoming the European Union's new tariffs on Chinese EVs, saying leaders here are hoping to build upon progress like that.
Is what we're looking to build upon to create a level playing field for our workers and our firms.
And we'll hear more from President Biden this afternoon as he's expected to hold a joint press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Reporting from Bari, Italy, Iris Tao, NTD News.
4 Russian Navy ships are docked at a port in Cuba, roughly 90 miles from Florida. Russia's military says the fleet held drills in the Atlantic Ocean for long-range, high-precision strikes.
This comes several weeks after President Biden gave Ukraine the green light to strike inside Russia with U.S. weapons. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg has more on the drills and reactions from the U.S.
We, of course, take it seriously, but these exercises don't pose a threat to the United States.
Pentagon and State Department officials say Russia's drills in the Atlantic are routine, emphasizing Cuba hosted Russian ships during each previous administration since 2013. That's after a 4-ship Russian convoy, including Russia's most modern frigate and a nuclear-powered submarine, docked in Cuba Wednesday. The Pentagon says it's monitoring Russia's military exercises.
I can tell you that the Navy's U.S. 2nd Fleet, U.S. 4th Fleet, U.S. Coast Guard Atlantic Area, and Canadian Joint Task Force Atlantic are conducting routine operations throughout the Atlantic, but we're going to continue to monitor what's happening in the region.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says a distinct difference this visit is Russia's submarine.
We have seen this kind of thing before, and we expect to see this kind of thing again, and I'm not going to read into any particular motives by Russia.
An anonymous senior U.S. official told multiple outlets none of the ships are carrying nuclear weapons. Russia's defense ministry says its frigate and submarine practiced high-precision missile strike drills on simulated enemy ships at a distance of around 370 miles. The Russian vessels are on a 5-day visit to Cuba, just 90 miles from Florida. Cuba said the Russian stopover is no threat to the region, stating the visits are standard practice. U.S. officials expect Russia's ships to stay in the region through the summer and possibly stop in Venezuela. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
And now we're joined by Robert Greenway, director of the Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation, to discuss all of this. Welcome, Robert. Great to have you with us. To begin with,
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I just want to start with your perspective on how the U.S. should interpret the presence of Russian warships near its borders, especially considering the historical context of the Cuban missile crisis and the current geopolitical dynamics.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and I don't take comfort from administration statements that we should have nothing to worry about. We heard the same when spy balloons from China were transiting the United States, crossing over strategic locations. Look, the fact of the matter is Russian port calls to Cuba are normal in the broad scope of history, but they haven't happened in 4 years. Missile drills off the eastern seaboard haven't happened in my adult lifetime. I'm not sure they've ever happened this close. Russia is sending a message. There's no question about it. I think immediately they're displeased with the administration approval of Ukrainian strikes in Russian territory. And I think that's the message that they're sending. But we also know that just a few months ago, there were Chinese and Russian ships off the Aleutian Islands in the Pacific, which is also relatively provocative. And you take these things as a whole, and I think what you can discern is that Putin does not take the Biden administration terribly seriously, and it feels comfortable taking very provocative actions with some of its most advanced warships.
Yeah, it's looking a little more scary in that context that you've placed it, especially considering this unprecedented aspect that you've pointed out, potentially unprecedented. Now, how might a strengthened Russia-Cuba alliance impact broader U.S. Foreign policy in this context we're talking about in Latin America?
Well, I think you're right to point to, and many have called the reference to the Cuban Missile Crisis. Look, we took dramatic action. It brought us to the brink of perhaps the closest we've been to nuclear conflict between two superpowers in 1961 between Russia and the United States. And I think it's right to reflect on that. It's a serious threat to have nuclear capable and potentially nuclear armed, although we know, or we believe that these vessels were not carrying nuclear weapons, they're capable of doing so. And so the threat of that in Cuba is just as pressing as it was in 1961. And second, that their onward travel to Venezuela indicates that the presence isn't limited to Cuba. It extends to other countries, and not just Russia, but China as well. And that should have us greatly concerned. This is our hemisphere at the end of the day.
For sure. Now, Robert, switching gears, 8 Tajikistan nationals have reportedly been arrested in a sting operation after U.S. authorities uncovered information indicating ties with ISIS. Now, ABC News reports that the suspects were initially allowed to enter the U.S. via the U.S.-Mexico border after being fully vetted. So realistically, how concerned should we be about potential terrorists crossing the border? Seems to be happening.
Extremely worried. First of all, it's impossible to fully vet illegal immigrants crossing the border, especially from high-risk nations with whom we don't have great relations and don't receive regular updates and information. They traveled 8,000 miles to cross the border, and we were lucky to get them. And I applaud law enforcement. But look, we had 2 Jordanians threaten the attempt to enter Quantico base. We had a Chechen shot by a U.S. Special Forces officer in Carthage, North Carolina, and we've had a number of close calls. This is the blinking red scenario that FBI Director Wray talked about in congressional testimony in January, and you've heard ever since from the intelligence community. These are steps that we saw in advance of 9/11. And recently, al-Qaeda senior leader Saif al-Adil from Iran called the faithful back to Afghanistan after our abandonment of it in order to restore the base of operations. We should be extremely concerned about both ISIS and al-Qaeda threats and the wide open southern border.
Wow, so incredible. Even in 2024, you're saying ISIS poses a very strong threat to the U.S.
Absolutely. They've always had the motive. They have the means because their resurgence continues to climb. It is the opportunity alone they're waiting for, and the border provides exactly that.
So what steps can the U.S. take to enhance border security and prevent terrorist threats, especially when it comes to our vetting process at the border?
Yeah, so we had 11 individual crossings on the terrorist watch list during the Trump administration, and we're now over 400 during the Biden administration and climbing. The answer is close the border and deport those with criminal records and those who are here illegally. It's clear this administration won't do it, which means we may need a change in administrations, and almost certainly will. And that's what I hope will happen.
And what's the Biden administration has been taking steps in recent days and months to, not just the Biden administration, but various lawmakers have been working on various bipartisan legislation. There have been efforts on both sides. What do you say to those efforts and the latest executive order that President Biden signed?
Yeah, so the numbers don't lie. The ultimate arbiter of any policy is its result. And the results are that people are not crossing in lower numbers since this executive order was signed. This is the same authority that the president said he didn't have. And we know that he recalled and repealed a number of President Trump's executive orders, which opened the border, and we've seen the results of it. And so I think at the end of the day, we have to look at what's actually occurring and not what people are saying. The House passed H.R. 2 over a year ago, and the Senate hasn't acted on it. The Senate draft never left the Senate. And so the only real bill that's in play here is the one that was passed by the House. That would do a great deal, but it doesn't appear the Senate's going to pick that up in the few legislative days we have left.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your insights. Robert Greenway, Director of the Allison Center for National Security at the Heritage Foundation. Great to speak with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
The ACLU and immigration advocacy groups are suing President Biden over his new border directive. They say the administration does not have the authority to override Congress and bar asylum seekers from entering the country.
An ACLU attorney said Biden's executive action is legally indistinguishable from former President Trump's ban, which the ACLU successfully blocked. The lawsuit says Biden's directive violates existing federal law. It says the 1980 Refugee Act enshrines a commitment to sheltering refugees seeking to escape persecution.
Under the order, immigrants crossing the border illegally are barred from seeking asylum. This restriction applies while the number of daily crossings between ports of entry is at a 7-day average of 2,500. The U.S. is looking to calm rising tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. The Lebanese terror group fired a barrage of rockets into northern Israel yesterday. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin discussed Hezbollah in a call with his Israeli counterpart this week. Here's what the Pentagon had to say.
But we don't want to see a wider regional conflict, and that's why we do want to see a de-escalation of tensions in the region.
The Iran-backed terrorist group said it was retaliating for an Israeli strike that killed a senior Hezbollah commander on Tuesday.
Israel said it identified around 160 projectiles crossing from Lebanon yesterday. That's the most Hezbollah has launched at Israel in one day since hostilities broke out at the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Meanwhile, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Hamas proposed numerous changes to a U.S.-backed ceasefire plan. Blinken says some of the changes are unworkable, but believes any gaps can be bridged.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan says the U.S. view is the time for haggling is over. He said the aim is to bring negotiations to a conclusion.
And the Supreme Court is positioning a decision on voting rules until September 30th. That's likely too late to impact the November 5th elections. Republicans are challenging President Biden's voter registration order. Pennsylvania lawmakers, led by Representative Don Kiefer, argue the executive order oversteps federal authority and infringes on state rights.
The order mandates all federal agencies assist in voter registration and participation efforts.
A federal district court dismissed the lawmakers' initial lawsuit, stating they lacked standing. An appeal is pending in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals.
Critics argue the order benefits Biden's campaign, while supporters claim it promotes voter participation.
And up ahead, the House votes to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Why Republicans say they took the action and the response from Democrats.
Climate activists interrupt the Congressional baseball game. What happened after they ran onto the field as Nationals Park? We have that and more for you in a minute. 'Cause 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 'cause
I was born into the wrong body, Mom.
I was astounded by what they were teaching. Child Protective Services did show up at my house. Parents are fearful of losing custody of their children because they say the wrong thing. Risks?
No risks. We got everything covered, I assure you, Mrs. Connors.
They don't want anyone to know the truth.
I can't stay quiet about this anymore. It's destroyed my health.
We're pushed into silence.
There's cultures that have been lost, but this culture hasn't been. The artist is showing us our sense of who we are, where we came from. You look at his hat. His hat is knitted probably by a man because a man traditionally knitted the hats. That hat tells you the story of who this person is, what his place in the culture is, the animals around him. Everything's all contained in the messages in the hat. And the tool that he's carrying over his shoulder. This is a centuries-old tool that has been able to rework the mountains. Those traditions are invaluable, and if we don't honor those traditions, then we're rootless. The artist is showing us the value of maintaining our culture and respecting our culture.
People often ask, where's the best place in Korea to do business?
Chongbuk Free Economic Zone, of course. Take the first step to a successful investment and enjoy a bright future with CP Petchu.
Welcome back. South Florida is facing a third day of heavy rainfall today, threatening more destructive flooding after Wednesday's storm.
Up to 6 inches of rain fell per hour yesterday, leading to what the National Weather Service called life-threatening flooding.
The dangerous flooding impacted critical infrastructure like highways, schools, and airports. Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency in 5 counties. No deaths were reported so far.
Torrential downpours pummeled South Florida yesterday, leaving streets flooded, causing traffic halts, stalled cars, and commuter detours. Over 8 million residents were issued flash flood warnings across the region. The record-breaking rains coincided with the traditional beginning of Florida's hurricane season, although no hurricanes were reported. The Miami Weather Service office warned people to stay off the roadways and get to higher ground. Mayors of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Hollywood declared emergencies, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared an emergency in 5 counties Wednesday. Southbound traffic on Interstate 95 in Broward County was diverted around a flooded section until workers could pump the drainage system. In Sarasota, nearly 4 inches of rain fell in 1 hour Tuesday evening. It's the most rain the city has ever seen in a single hour. The National Weather Service in Melbourne confirmed that an EF1 tornado hit near West Palm Beach on Wednesday morning. No injuries were reported, but access to Jupiter Island was cut off by debris on the road. At the Miami International Airport, there were over 450 weather-related delays and 50 cancellations. NBC Miami reports the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport had over 300 delays and a few cancellations. More rain was forecast for the rest of the week, leading Miami's Weather Service office to extend a flash flood watch through today. Flood watches continue elsewhere in southern Florida through Friday evening, with rain totals potentially reaching possibly 15 to 20 inches.
The House voted yesterday to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. This comes after Garland refused to turn over audio of President Biden's interview in his classified documents case.
The motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
The 216 to 207 vote fell along party lines. Republicans rallied behind the effort, and Speaker Mike Johnson said after the vote he was pleased with the outcome.
Look, we did our job on the contempt, and I think it sends an important message. We're defending Article 1 and our authority for oversight, and we have to do that. We'll see what happens next, but I mean, the House has to do its work, and I'm pleased with the outcome today.
Republicans have been working for several months to get audio from the interview that President Biden did with special counsel Robert Hur. Hur's report questioned Biden's age and mental competence, but recommended no criminal charges. Hur said he found insufficient evidence to successfully prosecute a case in court. Justice Department officials warned handing over the audio would set a dangerous precedent for future investigations. The White House then blocked the audio's release using executive privilege, and it is unlikely that the Justice Department, which Garland oversees, will prosecute him. Yet some Republicans are dismissing the notion that this vote was purely symbolic.
Hold him in contempt. We'll see what he does. I mean, hopefully he'll look at this and see the error of his ways.
The White House and congressional Democrats slammed Republicans for pursuing contempt. They dismissed efforts to obtain the audio as purely political.
There is no legitimate legislative purpose for them to obtain the audio recording because they're not prosecuting him. They're not trying to determine whether to prosecute him.
This is just a sad state of where we are. Republicans are choosing extremism and contempts and impeachments after their impeachment, efforts failed and hit some roadblocks. Now they're moving to this.
In a statement late Wednesday, Garland said the House turned a serious congressional authority into a partisan weapon. He said the vote disregards the constitutional separation of powers, the Justice Department's need to protect its investigations, and the substantial amount of information it already gave the House.
Double standard in our justice system. They believe that because they're...
And the Senate is expected to vote on a bill today that could guarantee access to in vitro fertilization nationwide. The legislation would also make it more affordable. The procedural vote is likely to fail due to GOP opposition. Republicans have criticized the Democrat-led measure as unnecessary overreach and a political show vote. The bill is part of Democrats' push to highlight reproductive issues ahead of November's election. It also comes as the U.S. marks 2 years since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.
Transgender swimmer Leah Thomas will not be competing in next month's Olympic Games in Paris.
Thomas lost a legal challenge against rules that define the women's races as closed to swimmers who have been through male puberty.
The 25-year-old argued that World Aquatics has rules that are invalid and unlawful. The organization is the international governing body for water sports.
But the Court of Arbitration for Sport found that Thomas had no standing to sue the transgender policy as someone no longer a member of U.S. swimming.
Responding to the ruling, World Aquatics said it's dedicated to fostering an environment that promotes fairness, respect, and equal opportunities for athletes of all genders.
A rally against mandatory broker fees in New York City. Participants want to pass a bill they say will make renting more affordable in the city.
Brokers also assembled to protest the bill, saying it will only create more problems. NTD's Fiona G. was on scene in front of City Hall yesterday to speak with both sides.
You show up to this lease signing and you have to pay a broker fee ranging from 15 to 30% of your annual rent to a broker that your landlord hired. That ain't right and it's unfair.
The bill, known as the FAIR Act, would have whoever hires the broker pay the fee, instead of the current norm where tenants are the ones required to pay the broker fee, even if it were the landlord who hired the broker. Supporters of the bill say that currently working-class renters are often unable to afford move-in fees, which include the broker fee that can range up to thousands of extra dollars. However, protesters against the bill say that removing the broker fee will actually cause an increase in rent prices. They also say that brokers are an important part of the house hunting process.
It would impact us and the landlords because the rents would become higher because the landlords would have to pay some of the fees, and that would raise the rents, and it also takes away from us direct relationship with the clients.
Well, I can't move out of where I'm at and move into the city simply because, you know, who's going to pay that much money? Just on a broker, it's more than the actual rent or the security. The rents won't go higher. We're paying people to do absolutely nothing.
I've saved my clients so much money in the long run. We provide a lot to these clients. We're building relationships. We're cultivating just a little bit of everything to the clients.
Last year, I had to move into an apartment, and total move-in fee was like $12,000. It makes it to where, like, even if you were in a bad place, you wouldn't want to find a new one. You try to do whatever you can to stay there, just to not deal with the fees of having to move in.
Last year in 2023, New York City Council member Chi Ose had already introduced this bill, but it never made it to a vote in the council. This year he has reintroduced it, and it remains to be seen what will happen with it. New York City is one of only 2 cities in America that requires tenants to pay the broker fee, but with housing pricing continuing to increase, this topic remains a subject of debate. Fiona G., NTD News.
New Jersey's top federal prosecutor testified yesterday at Senator Bob Menendez's bribery trial. He says the lawmaker sought to discuss the prosecution of a New Jersey real estate developer before recommending him to the post.
Senator, what do you think about your friend, U.S. Attorney Selinger's testimony from today?
Very transparent. Nothing inappropriate was asked of him. He wouldn't have accepted anything inappropriate. He didn't do anything inappropriate. More of a witness for us than them.
This was the second law enforcement figure who said Menendez sought to speak about a criminal case affecting a New Jersey businessman.
Prosecutors say Menendez tried to intervene in criminal cases to reward businessmen who bribed him with gold bars, cash, and a car.
Prosecutors allege the senator recommended Selinger as a U.S. attorney because he believed he could be influenced. They say Menendez was trying to protect a longtime friend who was facing criminal charges. And climate protesters disrupted the annual Congressional baseball game yesterday. The activists ran onto the field wearing white T-shirts with the phrase "End fossil fuels." At least 8 protesters interrupted the charity game. A police officer caught up with them and escorted them off the field.
According to the Capitol Police, 8 people are being charged for interfering with a member of the U.S. Capitol Police.
In a post on social media platform X, a group called Climate Defiance said that some of its members had gone onto the field to protest the Chevron-sponsored game.
Other protesters who were holding a Palestinian flag were escorted out of the bleachers.
And still to come, some NATO and EU officials are trying to combat Russian spy activity. What they say about diplomats allegedly planning acts of sabotage.
Hungary has to pay a fine of over $200 million. That's for failing to comply with the bloc's asylum rules. How the country responds when we return.
If you're watching this, I didn't make it. Thanks to people like you and the American Heart Association, my family never had to see this video. I was a healthy 47-year-old, no symptoms. But then my doctor discovered I had a bad heart valve that was beyond repair. The scariest day of my life was when I was sitting on a gurney as I looked and my wife was at my side and my kids had me surrounded. Deep down, you know, this could be it. This could be all there is.
Not having him around for Riley to grow up with and have that papa figure in his life, that would have been hard.
This little heart valve did something really big. It saved my life. I wouldn't be here today without it. The research for this heart valve was funded by the American Heart Association. And that's why I'm asking you to become a monthly donor for just $19 a month. When you do, you'll help fund the next medical breakthrough that could save your life or the life of someone you love. You'll also provide life-saving CPR training and help certify hospitals to give the best care to those who have had a heart attack or stroke. When you give $19 a month, we'll send you a t-shirt just like this one. From the moment you put it on, you'll help raise awareness for heart disease and stroke. Since my surgery, I had a son get married. I had a daughter graduate high school. I had another daughter give birth to a precious boy. I would have missed all that. And that's why it's personal for me.
We're very thankful for everyone who is a donor because it gives us more time.
Every 40 seconds, someone has a heart attack. The next person you help save could be someone you love or even you. Become a monthly donor today by calling or going to helpheart.org because it's personal.
My dad's name was David. He always talked about getting life insurance, and now it's too late.
No one was expecting my husband Dave to suffer from a heart attack. We didn't have life insurance. We thought we had more time.
Don't be Dave, and don't wait until it's too late to get the life insurance coverage you need. And if you don't have enough insurance to cover funeral costs, credit card debt, and other expenses, your family is going to get stuck with the bill. Call now to get affordable life insurance.
Just call
800-494-1562.
If you're over 50, you can't be turned down for this insurance, regardless of your health. Plus, there's no medical exam, no health questions. Your rate will never go up. Your coverage will never go down. And rates start as low as $5 a week. Remember, don't be Dave. Call now.
Call now.
800-494-1562.
Hi, I'm Kelly Wright. We thank you for joining us and watching America's Hope here on NTD News. Bottom line is, I know you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but let's give you some good news in the midst of the bad news. Watch us nightly, right here on NTD News, for a full dose of America's Hope.
Welcome back. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in Brussels trying to secure a more organized approach to aid for Ukraine. He's meeting with other NATO defense ministers who are working on a new plan for long-term assistance.
This is a critical moment. The stakes of this war are high, and Ukraine's survival is on the line, but so is all of our security. None of us would want to live in a world where Putin prevails. We would all be less secure if tyrants think that they can trample borders and cow their neighbors.
NATO members want to provide long-term security assistance and military training to Ukraine. They would partly use NATO's command structure and take funds from its common budget.
The chances of an agreement improved after Hungary promised not to veto the plans. That's as long as it's not forced to take part.
This week marks NATO's last high-level gathering before President Biden hosts a summit in Washington next month.
NATO's Secretary General said he hopes members at the U.S. summit will agree to maintain current funding levels for Ukraine aid. He estimates that's over $40 billion worth of equipment each year.
And now we have some short headlines from Italy, Spain, and other European countries. NATO members are set to take tougher actions against Russian spies. That's in response to a campaign of hostile activities by Moscow. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg says they've seen acts of sabotage, arson attempts, cyber attacks, and more.
NATO officials are now discussing options to respond. This includes the protection of critical maritime and cyber infrastructure.
Meanwhile, 8 EU foreign ministers say Russian diplomats should not be allowed to move freely around the bloc. They say they should be restricted to countries where they're accredited.
The ministers say propaganda and even the preparation of acts of sabotage are the main workloads for many Russian diplomats.
A brawl broke out in Italy's parliament yesterday. One lawmaker appeared injured and left the chamber in a wheelchair.
The lawmaker tried to hand a flag to another member of parliament when the brawl broke out. This happened during a discussion on a bill concerning local autonomies.
Amid the chaos, another person tried throwing punches at the lawmaker with the flag.
The lawmaker fell to the ground. Multiple seconds later, he was taken to the hospital and says he'll sue his attacker.
Torrential rains continued to fall on many parts of Spain yesterday. Video shows flooded streets in Murcia, a city in the southeastern part of the country.
Just a few cars navigated through the downpour and gusts of wind. On Tuesday, planes were grounded and on flooded runways at Palma de Mallorca Airport.
Spanish firefighters rescued a driver with mobility issues whose car was trapped in raging floodwaters. 3 fire engines and a helicopter were deployed for the operation.
The driver was eventually whisked away by helicopter unharmed.
The European Court of Justice today ordered Hungary to pay a fine of over $200 million and a further $1 million for every day it does not comply with the bloc's asylum rules.
The court had ruled in 2020 that Hungary failed to follow the bloc's policies on immigration. Hungary has taken a hard stance since Europe's immigration crisis began almost 10 years ago. It erected border fences and forcefully tried to stop many from entering.
A spokesperson for Hungary's prime minister condemned today's ruling. He says it's contrary to EU law and incompatible with his country's constitution. Greek authorities have released the identity of an American tourist who went missing from the island of Amorgos. 59-year-old Albert Calabay hasn't been seen or heard from since going for a long walk on Tuesday.
Amorgos' deputy mayor of tourism says Calabet has been coming to the island almost every year for 10 years. A large search and rescue operation is underway. Greece right now is in the midst of a blistering heat wave.
Think twice before reaching for those instant noodles. Food authorities in Denmark have recalled 3 types of the spicy treat imported from South Korea. This over possible risks for acute poisoning.
The noodles are made by Seoul-based Samyang Foods, one of South Korea's largest companies. The recalled noodles include spicy and hot chicken stew.
The Danish authorities say the products contain an overly high dose of capsicum. That's an active ingredient in chili peppers, but it's also a chemical that can be a neurotoxin and a health hazard.
Officials say children and teenagers in Denmark have been daring each other on social media to eat the 3 South Korean products. Samyang says the steps taken in Denmark were not based on product quality issues, but on local authorities thinking that the products were too spicy.
A stone sculpture of a vintage Mercedes-Benz may not be what you'd expect to find in a small Croatian town, but the German brand has achieved cult status in the region as a symbol of personal success. The new monument honors the immigrant history of that community. Check it out.
Decades ago, Imotski was a poor rural community in Croatia. In the 1960s and 70s, thousands left the town for West Germany in search of a better life. They earned a living as guest workers and sent money back home to help support their families. The monument sculpture of a vintage Mercedes was the brainchild of Ivan Topic. He's a local resident who returned to Imotski after nearly 2 decades of working in Germany.
When our people left, they left because they were poor, needy, because they yearned to build a better life for themselves. They dreamed of buying a bicycle or, in the best case, a motorcycle. But first a milking cow to feed their children. But lo and behold, Western Germany offered a decent life to every worker.
The dream was to one day return driving the ultimate status symbol, showing your neighbors your newfound prosperity. A fascination with the German car brand was established in the town, where it still represents half of some 16,000 registered vehicles. But returning home back then was no easy task.
It was hard to reach home back then. We had no decent roads. All our roads were unpaved. I personally remember a time when not a single road in Imotski was paved. But then, in a cloud of dust, Mercedes came to our homes with our returning fathers and grandfathers. And it is still here. They are gone, but Mercedes remained.
The idea to build a monument incorporating the beloved vehicle took years to complete. The town started a crowdfunding campaign to build and install the monument. Thousands chipped in to raise over $50,000. The building project drew help from across the continent.
The idea itself was really long in the making. It took about 5 years from the inception of the idea up to this point, up to the opening. The construction started about a year ago, and a lot of people worked on it. It was like a really collective effort. We also organized this winter a sculpting colony in which we invited sculptors and students of sculpture from around Europe.
Topic has a suggestion for the youth in his area.
Follow our example and buy cars that will serve them well. A car that serves you forever is never too expensive.
Coming up, New York City Mayor Eric Adams calls out Gaza war protesters, and police are investigating after the homes of the Brooklyn Museum's Jewish director and board members are vandalized.
That's as college campuses across the U.S. are still reeling from Gaza war protests. House lawmakers seeking answers from university leadership. Stay tuned for that right here on NTD News.
Come to Mathis Home for the Monumental Savings Event and get big values on the latest dining sets. Here's a hot buy. This table and 4 side chairs is only $442. Shop and compare, nobody beats Mathis Home. Or this 72-inch table is a great value at just $670 with a genuine white marble top. Check out this mid-century modern set. You get the table and 4 chairs all for just $698. Shop now and save during the Monumental Savings Event at Mathis Home.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
Rated in the best hearing aids of 2024, the Audien Atom 2 series offers superior sound quality and functionality for a fraction of the price. For just $189 a pair, the Atom 2 features 4 different hearing modes for all types of hearing loss. It packs crystal clear sound, a nearly invisible design, and is even rechargeable.
I actually like them better than my old $5,000 hearing aids. They're so comfortable, I forget I'm wearing them. And the sound is amazing.
The Atom Pro 2 is our smallest hearing aid yet, featuring advanced background noise cancellation, and is the world's first hearing aid with built-in UV cleaning that kills 99% of bacteria.
I could not believe how my hearing and life changed without seeing a doctor or having a hearing test.
Join over 500,000 happy customers today and get the hearing you deserve.
Call 1-800-433-6359 or go to AudienHearing.com to get your pair of Audien hearing aids starting at just $189.
Life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Prediabetes does. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test today. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org.
I'm Iris Howe at the White House, and we are NTD.
Mayor Eric Adams has condemned the October 7th terror attack and a recent Lower Manhattan protest. Hundreds of protesters praised the Hamas massacre Monday outside a solemn multimedia commemoration. Adams said such demonstrators are not a representation of New York. The mayor emphasized the importance of supporting free speech while condemning hateful expressions.
Anti-Israel protesters displayed Hezbollah and Hamas flags, attempted to storm the exhibit, and clashed with police. Police made several arrests.
The incident occurred near the stock exchange outside an exhibit named "The Moment the Music Stood Still." And it honors 364 victims of the Nova Music Festival attack.
Adams visited the exhibit, showing solidarity with grieving families. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called the protests repugnant and despicable.
And police in New York are investigating acts of anti-Semitic vandalism at the homes of Jewish board members of the Brooklyn Museum.
Authorities say 5 homes were vandalized Tuesday night across Manhattan and Brooklyn, including the home of the museum's director.
Images posted on social media show museum director Ann Pasternak's home splattered in red paint with a sign hanging in the entrance.
The NYPD Hate Crimes Task Force is going through surveillance video and speaking to witnesses to try to generate leads on suspects.
The Anti-Defamation League says the U.S. is currently experiencing its highest number of anti-Semitic incident reports since the group began tracking data 45 years ago.
The University of California in LA is set to receive a new chancellor. Dr. Julio Frank will take over the role. He's a global health expert and current president of the University of Miami.
Current Chancellor Jean Block is stepping down on July 31st. Block came under fire over the university's response to a pro-Palestinian encampment and other protests.
Dr. Frank's father and grandfather were Jews who fled Germany in the 1930s to Mexico.
He said that we're at a critical moment in higher education and acknowledged that some people have lost trust in higher education institutions.
He's set to take over his new role on January 1st. An interim chancellor will serve in the position until then.
An aerospace company Boeing in the spotlight in the aftermath of that mid-air blowout of a door panel earlier this year and 2 fatal crashes in 2018 and 2019.
The 737 airliner was grounded for a period of each of these incidents. Today, senators are looking into the FAA's oversight of the company. Let's watch.
We have to have the infrastructure, not only the physical infrastructure, but also the regulatory infrastructure. So we're also working to make sure we have the operating rules in place in time. So when these vehicles are certified, they know how to operate them. So okay. I think it's an important piece.
Thank you. My last question is about the FAA efforts to try to improve the availability of air traffic control. And that's important to us. It's important to everybody. But we lost our flight to New York City, which is, we've got to correct that. And my understanding is that the lack of air traffic controllers was relevant to that. With respect to the changes that were made in the Authorization Act, what's your assessment of where we're going to be on addressing that shortage of air traffic controllers?
Well, there are 2 pieces to that particular question. One has to do with our hiring generally. So we have increased our efforts to hire across the board by making it easier for military controllers to hire directly into the agency, by putting together a program to allow aeronautical universities to train students to the same standards as the academy so they can come, after taking the exam, come directly into facilities. So we've been able to really open up the pipeline for new controllers. It takes a long time to make a controller, so there's a little bit of a lag, but we're making really good progress. With respect to the service to Burlington, I think that was largely a reduction because we've reduced capacity on the East Coast corridor by 10% because of staffing problems, specifically in New York. We are in the process of moving some of that airspace to Philadelphia. That's been a long process, but we're hoping to have that cut over in July, end of July. And Philadelphia is a very healthy facility, so we should be able to staff up much more effectively there. So it's going to take some time to get that elephant through the boa, but we think it's going to be a solution to this problem.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to commend you on a good start in your new job, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Administrator Whitaker.
Morning, sir.
Welcome. In March, during my questioning of NTSB Chair Jennifer Hamady, when she appeared before this committee, she told me that Boeing was missing key documents and records about the specific MAX 9 aircraft involved in the Alaska Airlines Flight 1282. Has your investigation determined whether the documents specific to that MAX 9 plane, whether they even exist?
That is part of our overall investigation of this incident, and my understanding is that is true, that they do not exist.
If I understand correctly, the security camera footage was overwritten. Boeing doesn't know who performed work on the door plug, and no paperwork exists. Is that all right?
That is my understanding.
That seems remarkable and shocking. Is there concern at the FAA that an employee at Boeing is hiding key information about this?
That investigation is ongoing, and I know the Justice Department has a separate investigation underway. So I think too early to have an opinion about that, but we will thoroughly investigate those circumstances.
Prior to the MAX crashes, Boeing was a storied company with a rich history of building the best and the safest planes in the world. During the pandemic, Boeing conducted employee buyouts and involuntary layoffs. Once travel picked up and airplane orders resumed, Boeing hired to fill the workforce gap. According to a Wall Street Journal article published this week, of the more than 30,000 Boeing employees represented by one of the unions, roughly half have less than 6 years' experience. That is double the level before the pandemic. During your investigation, to what extent has the inexperience of engineers or inspectors contributed to some of the observations made in the FAA's audit?
I think significantly, and I would say that this lack of transfer of knowledge from early retirements and the impact of COVID has been a risk throughout the aviation ecosystem. And I think the better companies have used their SMS system to identify the risk and put specific programs in place to mitigate that, either bringing retired employees back to monitor, giving more training, or having fewer requirements for new employees. Boeing did not have a program like that in place, and that is a gap that was identified and is part of the new plan.
That same Wall Street Journal article went on to say that Boeing executives, quote, didn't realize the extent of the knowledge loss until after the Alaska accident. What requirements will the FAA impose on Boeing to compensate for the inexperience on the factory floor?
So the plan includes a number of employee-specific initiatives focused on training, increasing the amount of training, but also their instructions and installation protocols are extraordinarily complex, and they've recognized that. So they're going through a process to simplify, and then they're going to be able to measure proficiency of employees to perform tasks. So that is a part of the KPI measurements that we'll be looking at.
In January, you announced that Boeing would not be allowed to produce more than 38 MAX 9 aircraft each month. Right now, Boeing's producing around 32 each month. My top priority in this regard, as is yours, is ensuring that these planes are safe. But we also want Boeing to be competitive worldwide. What metrics will Boeing have to meet in order for it to be able to make more planes?
So there are a variety of metrics. There are the 5 or 6 KPIs that we'll be monitoring. Those are up and running. We are establishing what is the green zone, what is the yellow zone, and what is red. So those need to stay in the green zone while they're increasing production. And then we have progress that we're monitoring on the other elements of the plan, the rollout of tool management systems and training and things of that nature. And we will measure that through the audit. So it'll be a combination of those factors. We'll be able to watch that as they start to increase production from the current level and make an evaluation as they get to that 38 number.
As you know, the Boeing MAX airplane crashes in 2018 and 2019 shocked and scared pilots and passengers alike. Boeing made terrible mistakes that killed hundreds of people and shattered the company's reputation. Likewise, the FAA was caught flat-footed with shoddy oversight. In this latest crisis of confidence, what is the FAA doing differently to hold itself accountable for the oversight the agency is required to conduct?
So it's a good question and a fair question, and I think we have been too much in reactive mode, waiting for some event to occur and analyzing the events to find out what to do differently. So we're shifting to a much more proactive approach. So on the manufacturing side, it's introducing inspectors and coming up with clear indices to monitor performance. We're also taking a look at our own risks, including controllers, which is why we did this fatigue study, and we're building in more rest for schedules that shouldn't have existed, frankly, before. And really the ultimate goal is to get to data and to get the data that we can analyze up front to try to see these things before they happen. And that's not an easy lift, but it is achievable, and that's going to be really one of my main focuses going forward.
Thank you.
Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much for your work, Administrator. I'm going to start with one quick thing. I think we all know it's critical for safety and security that we upgrade our aviation system, and kind of stepping back from a lot of the good questions that have been asked, looking back at the outage to NOTAM, which, as you know, alerts personnel to potential safety hazards along a route, and grounded when that happened. Last year grounded the flights nationwide. And Senator Moran and I worked together with Senator Capito and Representative Stauber over in the House to pass a bill that directs the FAA to upgrade the NOTAM system by September of this year. Could you tell me where FAA is on that deadline?
So that program is on track. And in response to those events, we have taken a look at the resilience of the system generally to make sure that we can come up with a protocol so that we don't have a single system go down and have it bring the whole NAS down. So we're focusing on the resiliency of our systems and also our ability to operate among cybersecurity threats and the like. So there's a body of work around that.
There have been an alarming number, as you know, of close calls on runways this year. FAA reported 23 runway incursion events that occurred in 2023, collision in January at the Tokyo airport where people died. And we worked with the chairman and the ranking member on the FAA reauthorization to include provisions to ensure planes are equipped with technology that alert pilots to the presence of other planes on the runway. How will these
And for round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app.
Stay with us and we'll bring you more in the next 2 hours.
Hi, I'm Tim Che, the director and writer of The Firing Squad. You can participate in our Million Souls campaign, inviting everyone you know to Jesus. Listen, we all face some kind of firing squad in our lives, and yet faith in the Lord, that challenge can lead us to true peace in this insane world. We can't do it without you. We're competing with big Hollywood movies, so we're relying on your voice to spread the word. Thank you again for supporting this important movie.
Being prepared is a part of who you are, but it's especially important in the case of a disaster. Be informed about possible emergencies in your area. Make a plan that covers where you go in an emergency. Build a kit with the things you need to survive. There's no one more capable of planning for your situation than you. Start your plan today. Go to ready.gov/myplan.
The glory of piano masterpieces from the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods. New Tang Dynasty Television invites you to join the 2024 NTD International Piano Competition. Together, we preserve and revitalize the art of authentic classical piano music. October 14th to the 19th at the Kaufman Music Center in New York City. Apply now at piano.ntdtv.com.
The shining gem of New England. This delightful seaside city of Newport is one of the most beautiful places in the state. Today, we bring you here as we meet with our friends and fellow musicians from the Hermitage Piano Trio. As a team, they have garnered multiple Grammy Award nominations with their breathtaking performances.
Oh, wow, I did not think this instrument can make that sound, right?
The pandemic made this reunion even more special.
3 of us, we like it because we feel music the same way, so...
Don't miss us on the next episode of Piano Talks.
You need some help?
Your tow chains are a little loose. Could spark a wildfire. I could show you how to secure them properly if you'd like.
Sure. Thanks a lot.
Anytime. You should check out SmokeyBear.com. They've got a bunch of tips on wildfire prevention.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Welcome to NTD News Today.
Here are today's top stories.
A new $50 billion loan to Ukraine, how it's connected to Russia, and Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says the G7 is not a fortress, but an offer of values to the world. The latest on the G7 summit.
Record-setting rain and life-threatening flooding. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declares an emergency across areas in South Florida, and forecasters say more rain is on the way.
The Supreme Court postpones a decision on a Republican challenge to President Biden's voter registration order. What that means for the November election.
A newly discovered COVID-19 variant is becoming the dominant strain of the virus across the United States. The CDC says the variant constitutes about 25% of all cases detected by the agency.
University leaders under scrutiny amid a rise in anti-Semitic incidents across the U.S. Lawmakers are seeking answers.
Google's AI chatbot returning a mirror image of Chinese propaganda in some Chinese language answers. We asked Gemini some questions about topics Beijing considers sensitive. More on what the bot told us.
This is NTD News Today, live from our NTD Global Headquarters. Here are Stephania Cox and Chris Beers.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hogan sitting in for Chris Beers.
Justin, the Supreme Court has unanimously rejected a challenge to the abortion pill mifepristone.
This allows the drug to remain widely available.
The court dismissed the lawsuit, saying that the group challenging the FDA did not have legal standing to sue.
The justice said the plaintiffs failed to show any injury and that they could address their concerns through the regulatory or legislative processes.
The decision means that the pill can still be obtained within 10 weeks of gestation and can be dispensed by healthcare providers other than physicians.
Mifepristone is a critical component of the most common form of abortion in the United States.
And South Florida is facing a third day of heavy rainfall today, threatening more destructive flooding after Wednesday's storm.
Up to 6 inches of rain fell per hour yesterday, leading to what the National Weather Service called life-threatening flooding.
The dangerous flooding impacted critical infrastructure like highways, schools, and airports. Governor Ron DeSantis declared a state of emergency in 5 counties. No deaths were reported so far.
Torrential downpours pummeled South Florida yesterday, leaving streets flooded, causing traffic halts, stalled cars, and commuter detours. Over 8 million residents were issued flash flood warnings across the region. The record-breaking rains coincided with the traditional beginning of Florida's hurricane season, although no hurricanes were reported. The Miami Weather Service office warned people to stay off the roadways and get to higher ground. Mayors of Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and Hollywood declared emergencies, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis declared an emergency in 5 counties Wednesday. Southbound traffic on Interstate 95 in Broward County was diverted around a flooded section until workers could pump the drainage system. In Sarasota, nearly 4 inches of rain fell in 1 hour Tuesday evening. It's the most rain the city has ever seen in a single hour. The National Weather Service in Melbourne confirmed that an EF1 tornado hit near West Palm Beach on Wednesday morning. No injuries were reported, but access to Jupiter Island was cut off by debris on the road. At the Miami International Airport, there were over 450 weather-related delays and 50 cancellations. NBC Miami reports the Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International Airport had over 300 delays and a few cancellations. More rain was forecast for the rest of the week, leading Miami's Weather Service office to extend a flash flood watch through today. Flood watches continue elsewhere in southern Florida through Friday evening, with rain totals potentially reaching possibly 15 to 20 inches.
President Biden and G7 leaders announced a deal providing Ukraine with a $50 billion loan this year. The loan will be backed by frozen Russian assets, demonstrating a continued effort to counter Russia's invasion.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni kicked off the G7 summit in Italy today, riding high after a triumph in Italy's European election last weekend.
G7 is not an enclosed fortress that has to perhaps defend itself from someone. It's an offer of values that we open to the world to have shared development as a goal.
The summit started with a discussion about Africa, climate change, and development. The conversation then switched to the Middle East. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said President Biden will push for ceasefire negotiations and urge Hamas to accept a proposal backed by Israel.
2 sessions dedicated to Ukraine followed. The first one included Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. He said he will sign a security agreement with Japan and the U.S. at the summit today.
The United States and Japan would be the last 2 G7 nations to sign such agreements, which pledge long-term support as the war in Ukraine continues with no end in sight. And back to Russia. Although Russia is already heavily sanctioned, the country has adapted, and so far they've been able to continue funding their war in Ukraine. So looking at the new funds coming into Russia, we're now joined by Jason Sorens, an economist with the American Institute for Economic Research. Welcome, Jason. To begin with,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. What are the key elements of the new sanctions imposed by the United States on Russia, particularly in terms of targeting China-based companies?
Right. So the U.S. is responding here to news stories about Western-made components showing up in Russian military equipment on the battlefield in Ukraine, drones, for example. And so what's happening is that middlemen in places like China are purchasing Western components on the open market and then selling them to Russia, and Russia is willing to pay a high price for them. So the U.S. is targeting specific individuals and companies that they believe are doing this. The problem, of course, is that money will find its way in a global market. So sanctioning these individuals and companies just means that likely new individuals and companies will emerge to fulfill that role, to buy these components, which after all can be used for lots of non-military purposes. And there's a strong incentive for them to make a large profit by selling them to Russia. So these sanctions give the appearance of doing something, but it's unclear whether they will actually have any impact on the battlefield.
Oh, very interesting. Okay, so considering that they've already adapted, as I said earlier, to previous sanctions, and you said that other players may come up to fill their place, how effective do you think it could be in affecting Russia's efforts in the war?
These sanctions are not likely to be very effective in changing anything on the battlefield. Again, a lot of these components, microchips, for example, can be used for many non-military consumer purposes, and you have a global market with millions of players. These traders can move in and out of these markets and purchase these components and sell them on to brokers in Russia. So it's going to be very difficult to stamp out that kind of trade. In the meantime, it will raise compliance costs for American companies. American manufacturers now have new paperwork that they're going to have to do, new due diligence they'll have to do to try to prevent these components from falling into the hands of sanctioned individuals and companies. So it's not likely to have a huge effect on Russia. Political scientists who study this find that sanctions rarely have an impact on changing the target country's behavior, unless you're sanctioning the individuals who are themselves closely tied to the regime, which the U.S. has already done. So there's not too much more that the U.S. could do sanctions-wise to affect Russia's ability to prosecute this war.
What do you think economically, what can they do otherwise?
Well, I mean, at this point, again, anything that you do in terms of sanctions is going to hurt American companies who then have to deal with these sanctions. We get less trade. It gums up the works of trade with third-party countries like China and India. So it's going to be difficult for American companies to deal with additional sanctions. Anything that you might do there could hurt us more than it hurts Russia.
But are there other tactics?
I mean, so what the U.S. is doing with the with the interest from the frozen funds. They're providing loans to Ukraine. This is pretty much the only thing that they could do with those funds. You couldn't just take that money and use it to fund the U.S. budget deficit, for example. You have to use that for some purpose closely allied to the reasons why you froze those funds to begin with. So that part of what the G7 is doing, makes sense given their options. But sanctions really are not likely to have any more impact.
Okay, and next, how might the increased scrutiny on shell companies in Hong Kong and the threat of secondary sanctions impact the global semiconductor supply chain and the economy?
Well, again, this is going to raise compliance costs. So if you are manufacturing these semiconductors, you're going to have to now do additional paperwork and allocate staff toward figuring out who your customers are. And so this is going to raise costs for them. It's not alone a killer to your business model, but it is an additional cost that's going to raise the price of semiconductors globally, and that is going to affect the bottom line of manufacturers. So, a lot of people are thinking that with the new subsidies that lots of countries are doing for microchip fabs, that you're going to see a global glut of microchips in the next couple of years. So their prices might fall dramatically, which is already going to hurt these manufacturers' bottom line. And by the way, it also means that it'll be cheap for Russia to acquire these on secondary markets. So we're heading into a period when it's going to be maybe a rough couple of years for the semiconductor industry.
Right. Thank you so much. Jason Sorens, economist at the American Institute for Economic Research. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Former President Trump and key advisors to President Biden will present their differing economic visions today. The discussions will occur in conversations with America's top business leaders.
Trump is addressing the Business Roundtable at their Washington, D.C. headquarters. Biden's White House Chief of Staff spoke to the same group of over 200 CEOs. That's on behalf of the president, who's in Italy at the G7 meeting.
At 12:30 p.m., Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen will speak at the Economic Club of New York, discussing expanding the economy's productive capacity.
Trump will also meet with House Republicans and have lunch with Senate Republicans today.
Republicans hope these visits will help unify their divided caucuses in the Senate and House as the November elections approach.
And the Supreme Court is postponing a decision on voting rules until September 30th. That's likely too late to impact the November 5th elections. Republicans are challenging President Biden's voter registration order. Pennsylvania lawmakers, led by House member Don Kiefer, argue the executive order oversteps federal authority and infringes on state rights.
The order mandates all federal agencies assist in voter registration and participation efforts.
Federal court dismissed the lawmakers' initial lawsuit, stating they lacked standing. An appeal is pending in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals.
Critics argue the order benefits Biden's campaign, while supporters claim it promotes voter participation.
Still to come, Tesla shareholders are voting on a $56 billion pay package for CEO Elon Musk. Although it was previously struck down by a judge, they won't have the final say.
And the president of Microsoft is testifying before a House panel on Homeland Security today. He'll be questioned about the company's security practices. We'll have that and more for you in just a minute.
Funny expression. There's a little scar right below his neck. The artist, on a trip to somewhere in South America, he met this kid who told him a story about himself. The technique is really good. As you'll see, like in the foreground, there's water on his face. The texture is so realistic, but then sort of in the back, you have these washed out colors, almost a sort of fantasy feel. The whole of the picture is very balanced, and you still get that sense of harmony and warm light from it. The artist, he was really moved by the child's spirit. The child's from the slums, and so he looks around and he sees people who either get into drugs or they get into gangs, and he doesn't want that for himself. So he was telling this artist about how he's going to make a better life for himself. The immense spirit and determination that the kid had really stuck with the guy, so that's why he painted such a large portrait of the child.
Many of us have been child fighters, but this little kid learned to defend himself in his own way. It's a great sacrifice that way. And so this is another form of strength, another form of endurance. We are capable of much more than we think. These children amaze us.
You know you don't have to wear your PT gear anymore, right?
It's comfortable.
So how's civilian life treating you?
It's fine.
When I got out, I didn't want to admit that there was anything wrong because I felt like a failure. And then I realized, like, there's nothing to be ashamed of. So I started talking to someone. Maybe you are fine, but if you're not, it's okay.
Thank you.
If you or a veteran you know needs support, don't wait. Reach out. Find resources at va.gov/reach.
Hi, I'm Kelly Wright. We thank you for joining us and watching America's Hope here on NTD News. Bottom line is, I know you're sick and tired of being sick and tired, but let's give you some good news in the midst of the bad news. Watch us nightly, right here on NTD News, for a full dose of America's Hope.
A newly discovered COVID-19 variant is becoming the dominant strain of the virus across the U.S. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, says the KP.3 variant constitutes about 25% of all cases detected by the agency. The latest COVID-19 data was collected over a 2-week period from May 26th to June 8th.
Both the KP.2 and KP.3 variants have been nicknamed FLIRT due to the location of their spike proteins.
CDC data suggests that despite the increase, the U.S. is currently seeing low levels of COVID-19 activity.
According to the CDC, weekly deaths are at the lowest point since the pandemic started in early 2020.
And the State Department has launched a public beta test for its new online passport renewal system. This allows Americans to renew their passports without visiting an office or mailing in documents. The program starts daily at 1 p.m. for a limited number of eligible citizens. The daily limit is unspecified, but will gradually increase, according to the Washington Post.
Applicants must be over 25, have passports issued between 2009 and 2015, and not need any demographic changes. They also must not travel internationally for at least 8 weeks after applying.
People won't need to mail their old passports and can upload a digital photo.
Processing times remain at 6 to 8 weeks, with expedited service not available online. The State Department received over 21 million passport applications in fiscal year 2023, a record high.
Wednesday was another banner day for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, with both indexes notching record closing highs for the third straight day.
The latest inflation data showed consumer prices in May were softer than expected, and the Federal Reserve held interest rates steady after wrapping up its latest 2-day policy meeting. Take a look.
The U.S. Central Bank projected only 1 interest rate cut this year, down from its previous prediction of 3, which led the major indexes to come down off their session highs. The Dow actually closed down 0.1%, while the S&P rose about 0.9, and the tech-heavy NASDAQ added 1.5%. Helping to power the market, Apple, which rose nearly 3% after announcing AI additions to its iPhones earlier this week. The company's market cap actually passed Microsoft's during the session, helping it reclaim its post as the most valuable company in the world. The continued market dominance of mega-cap tech companies is concerning, says Wealth Alliance President and Managing Director Eric Ditton.
3 stocks are now 20% of the S&P. Has that ever happened? No. That is as lopsided as we've been. And we know who they are. We know the offenders, Microsoft, NVIDIA, Apple. This is very much a two-tiered market. It's a narrow market, advanced declines going the wrong way. New highs, new lows going the wrong way. I don't even want to talk to you about small cap stocks. Minus 4% a year last 3 years. So it's these big tech stocks that are carrying the day. How high do they go? No one knows.
Shares of Microsoft rose nearly 2%, and AI chip leader NVIDIA rose more than 3.5%, and Oracle surged 13% after it forecast strong revenue growth above estimates.
On Capitol Hill, Microsoft President Brad Smith is testifying before a House panel on Homeland Security today. The company's security practices are under scrutiny after Russian and Chinese hackers breached its systems over the past year. China-linked hackers stole 60,000 State Department emails last year by breaking into the tech giant's systems. A Russian group spied on Microsoft's senior staff emails earlier this year as well.
In April, the Cyber Safety Review Board criticized Microsoft for its lack of transparency over the Chinese hack. The board said the intrusion had been preventable.
Microsoft launched a new cybersecurity initiative last November. The company said it took the measure against the increasing scale and high stakes of cyber attacks.
Lawmakers will examine Microsoft's security lapses and plans for improvements.
And in the coming hours, we'll know the results of a shareholders' vote at Tesla. They'll have the final say in whether CEO Elon Musk will get a pay package previously struck down by a judge. Here's more on the decision, worth over $50 billion.
Tesla shareholders are voting to approve a $56 billion pay package for CEO Elon Musk. That's according to the man himself on Wednesday, with Musk sounding confident on social media. "Thanks for your support," he said in a post on X, adding the vote was by wide margins. The payouts would be the largest remuneration terms in US corporate history. Overwhelming shareholder support could calm investor worries about Musk's future at the company. It may also give Tesla a stronger case in its fight to reverse a court decision to void the pay package. But Musk would still face a lengthy legal battle. He has to convince a Delaware judge who said the Tesla board was beholden to him, and may also have to fight fresh lawsuits over the latest vote. The results will be announced at a meeting at Tesla's headquarters in Texas on Thursday afternoon.
The nation's largest oil trade group is suing the Biden administration over its emissions reduction regulations. It would also impact Biden's push for electric vehicle manufacturing. The Environmental Protection Agency issued new tailpipe emissions rules in March. The rules force U.S. automakers to produce and sell more electric vehicles. The Biden administration projects up to 56% of all car sales will be electric between 2030 and 2032. The American Petroleum Institute says the rule exceeds the agency's authority. The regulation will eliminate most new gas cars and traditional hybrids from the U.S. market in less than a decade. The Institute's senior vice president says the lawsuit aims to protect American consumers, auto plant workers, and energy security. The National Corn Growers Association and the American Farm Bureau Federation will join the lawsuit. The two groups rely on gas-powered cars to support the corn ethanol industry. Activists are promising to take legal action in response to New York Governor Kathy Hochul's freeze on the city's congestion pricing scheme. The initiative is the first of its kind in the U.S. Commuters entering Manhattan below 60th Street would have faced a $15 toll starting June 30th. New York City's controller and activists claim that the toll would have raised $1 billion for the Metropolitan Transit Authority. Earlier this month, the governor announced an indefinite pause on the policy. Opponents say the hiatus will harm disabled New Yorkers and those with respiratory conditions. The congestion pricing tolls were meant to alleviate heavy traffic and reduce emissions. The plan would also finance upgrades to the subway system.
And the public library system in the nation's 13th largest city is seeing a spike in interest in its summer reading program. The San Jose Public Library spans 25 locations in Silicon Valley. NTD's David Lamb reports.
Shh. I'm at the King Library in San Jose, so I have to keep my voice low. But the big news is their summer readership interest is high.
Registration for San Jose Public Library's summer learning program located in Silicon Valley, and the number of book giveaways is increasing drastically, according to the library system.
These events they all have an educational component, and they're fun. So some of them could be like a petting zoo or magic bubbles, arts and crafts, an author event.
Nancy Macias with the library said more than 6,000 people of all ages registered to its program. Readers recorded over 200,000 reading minutes tracked in the first 12 days. But the plot thickens. The library's goal is to reach 4 million minutes read this summer and to pass last year's 10,000 signups, with incentives and prizes for reaching reading goals. There's a 47% increase in signups compared to last year. The program lasts from June 1st to end of July. She said the summer programs would help prevent kids from academically sliding down.
It was created to help prevent the summer slide, which tends to happen when children are on summer break and not really in a school setting where they're reading and keeping up with academics.
Dee Han, mother of a 2- and 4-year-old, says she takes her kids to the library 2 to 3 times a week.
I think it really makes them speak better. I come from a family where English wasn't a primary language, so I feel like they're learning to express themselves a lot more through words, and that's what I couldn't do when I was growing up.
Macias says signups for adults went up nearly 80% than last year.
For me, I like to read philosophy books. So one of my favorite books is Art of War. And then for them, it's obviously dinosaurs, and him, it's princess books.
During the summer, it's enticing to go to the water parks or the beaches, but the library staffs hope that people could pick up a book as well and to just increase their lifelong learning and to enjoy knowledge. Reporting in San Jose, California, David Lamb, NTD News.
The Rose Fire burning in Wickenburg, Arizona has forced some of the residents to evacuate. The blaze has also forced the shutdown of U.S. Route 60 in both directions in the area.
According to the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, the fire has burned more than 200 acres and has not been contained.
Officials announced that 6 buildings have been burned. About 100 homes are at risk.
Local authorities are advising residents to have an emergency bag prepared.
And for the evacuation, those who live on the west side of US 60 need to evacuate to the Wickenburg Community Center. And those who live on the east side of the highway need to evacuate to Morristown.
Authorities have identified the gunman accused of opening fire at an Atlanta food court Tuesday. 34-year-old Jeremy Malone is accused of wounding 3 people during the shooting at the Peachtree Center Mall. Malone was then shot by an Atlanta police officer before being taken into custody. He was taken to the hospital for treatment and is now behind bars. The 3 shooting victims are in stable condition. Malone is facing numerous charges, including aggravated assault and possession of a firearm by a convicted felon.
Dashcam footage from the Virginia State Police shows the moment a trooper was hit in a chain reaction crash this week. We just want to warn you before watching, some might find this disturbing.
It starts with a sedan stopped on Interstate 495 in Annandale that refused to move. As the trooper responded, as you can see, a Jeep hit a tractor trailer that was stopped because the sedan was blocking the lane.
The Jeep spun into the trooper's patrol car, hitting the sedan and the officer. The trooper got right back up and appeared to not have serious injuries. Officials say the sedan driver suffered minor injuries.
She was charged with a DUI as well as possession of an illegal substance, obstruction, improperly stopping on a highway, and refusal of a blood or breath test. The Jeep driver was also charged with a DUI. Every year, the third Sunday of June is set aside to recognize the importance of dads. NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on the tradition and some Father's Day gift ideas for that special person in your life.
Sonora Smart Dodd from Spokane, Washington, gets the credit for coming up with Father's Day. Her dad, a Civil War veteran, raised her and her 5 siblings on his own after Mom passed away during childbirth. Inspired in 1909 by a Mother's Day sermon, Dodd proposed a similar day for dads. In 1972, President Richard Nixon signed legislation officially establishing the third Sunday of June as Father's Day. The day now stands as a cherished tradition, honoring fathers across the nation. Jennifer Young, the owner of a gift and clothing store in Seattle, discusses what makes a good Father's Day gift.
Just some way to show your father that you know him and connect with him and know what he is interested in.
The gift shop owner suggests giving a gift that shows you want to hang out with your dad.
You know, like a hiking book so that you guys can go hiking together, or a cookbook so you guys can cook together.
Young says something more on the entertainment side of things works well too.
Puzzles you can do together, games you can play together, those kind of things.
Or how about a list of tasks to check off with your dad?
This is a great one for getting a dad is the family bucket list, because then it shows that this is something you want to do with your dad as a family, make these memories together.
Young also has some tips for dads that like to get creative in the kitchen or behind a bar.
This is great for dads who are grill masters, barbecue companion. If your dad is a mixologist, there's some great, these are called nippers, and they're great for making specialty cocktails.
At her stores, Young also has pickleball paddle kits as well as specialty socks for those dads that are really into the sport. Whatever you choose to show your father how important he is, you can't go wrong with good old-fashioned time. A nice stroll in the woods, a good talk over a hot meal, sharing that most precious commodity with the person you call dad. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, U.S. intelligence agencies say they're taking foreign election interference seriously and could inform Americans of threats if the situation is severe enough.
The Chinese premier is paying New Zealand a visit. This is the highest official exchange between China and New Zealand in 7 years as they seek to deepen their trade. Find out more when we return.
Hey everyone, it's me, Sebastian, and it is a beautiful day today. We have so much to be grateful for, so just remember, if you see someone without a smile, give them one of yours. I just love inspiring people to be the best they can be, and the reason I'm able to inspire so many people is because people like you who inspire me with your support of Shriners Hospitals for Children. Since I was little, I've broken 100 bones, and I've had 19 surgeries. Shriners Hospitals for Children was with me every step of the way. But more than that, they've given me the confidence to know I can do whatever I set my mind to. Like right now, I've set my mind to sharing my smile with you. Did you get it?
Because of people like you, I can play the violin.
I can play piano.
I can understand.
The help I get is only possible because of caring people like you who pick up the phone and call the number on your screen to make your monthly gift.
And when you call or go online right now to donate $19 a month or more, we'll send you this adorable Love to the Rescue blanket as a thank you and a reminder of all the smiles you're bringing to kids' faces every day.
Kids like me. And me. And me. And me. So what are you waiting for? You can inspire kids like me by visiting loveshriners.org. After all, you can't help everyone, but you can help someone. So let's go!
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for giving. Join me and bring a smile to the world with your monthly gift today.
Please call now. If operators are busy, please call again or go to loveshriners.org right away.
Join me and bring a smile to the world.
Do you know that Cars for Compassion is the best way to donate your car? Through this non-profit program, you can not only help us keep bringing the world independent and daringly truthful journalism, but also significantly impact the life of somebody who needs a vehicle. The Epoch Times fights misinformation and big tech censorship by being independent and unbound to advertisers. Every single contribution to Cars for Compassion is a powerful endorsement of our unwavering mission. All you have to do is go to carsforcompassion.org and let us know about your car, and we'll schedule a pickup time and email you a tax-deductible receipt. To do this, just click the link below. Support truth, compassion, and hope. Donate your car right now at www.carsforcompassion.org.
People often ask, where's the best place in Korea to do business?
Chongbuk Free Economic Zone, of course. Take the first step to a successful investment and enjoy a bright future with CP Petchu.
We're in the nation's capital asking the important questions so that you're in the know. Join us daily, Monday through Friday, on the Capitol Report on NTD News.
Hi there again. Intelligence agencies say they are closely tracking attempts to influence U.S. elections from foreign sources. They're watching for deepfakes and other false information. Whether or not the public will know about any election interference attempts would be up to intelligence agency heads. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or DNI, says it would depend on if the information was serious enough to change the outcome of the election. Lawmakers have been concerned that new technology and divisions in American society would overwhelm any defense against election interference. ODNI says Russia is seen as the primary threat to the upcoming election. It also identified China and Iran as sources of threats. Officials say intelligence analysts have seen more potential cases of election interference, foreign election interference, in the past few months than in the last 4 or 5 years.
The highest level visit between China and New Zealand in 7 years. Today, the Chinese Premier Li Qiang is visiting the country. The two nations signed agreements on trade, human rights, and climate. New Zealand seeks more economic cooperation with China, despite security concerns and China's tensions with the U.S. Here's that story.
China is New Zealand's largest export market. The country is seeking to increase trade with Beijing despite concerns over foreign interference.
We've been pretty upfront about foreign interference. Our head of our intelligence agencies have been through the public sessions and annual reviews, been very open and public and transparent about that. You saw myself a few months ago call out cyber attack on New Zealand's parliamentary systems, and we call that out, and we'll continue to do that. We've got no tolerance for foreign interference from any country.
New Zealand is not a U.S. ally, but the two share a close strategic partnership. Both are members of the Five Eyes, an intelligence sharing alliance. The Chinese premier promised visa-free travel for New Zealanders, and New Zealand agreed to support more Confucius institutes in the country. The U.S. and the U.K. have both warned these institutes could serve as Beijing's footholds to influence education and as a tool to spy on Chinese students studying abroad. Outside the hotel where China's senior official is staying, both protesters and supporters gathered. Among the Chinese flags, a banner held by a protester read, "Where do China's transplant organs come from?" Investigators have uncovered evidence in China of live organ harvesting targeted detained faith groups and dissidents. Practitioners of Falun Dafa were seen in the crowd, urging the Chinese regime to end the nearly 25-year-old persecution of the spiritual practice in China.
Pro-Beijing talking points slipping into Google's AI chatbot, answers in Chinese language mode. We asked the bot some questions about topics Beijing considers sensitive. What did it tell us?
The AI chatbot is called Gemini. It's been found to contain pro-Beijing propaganda when producing answers related to certain topics that the Chinese regime considers sensitive. In other cases, it didn't even offer up answers after being asked about certain topics, like the Tiananmen Square massacre. The issue was first reported by Voice of America. NTD performed a test on Gemini. As to describe the Chinese Communist Party in simplified Chinese, the bot said it would lead the Chinese people to march forward on the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics and realize the Chinese dream of national rejuvenation. The response directly mirrors talking points and language used by Chinese Communist Party officials. The chatbot did not mention the regime's human rights abuses or rising calls among Chinese people for the CCP's leader to step down. As for questions about China's human rights issues, Gemini gave a general summary. It said some human rights groups and governments have slammed China over reaching freedom of speech, religion, and rally. The bot added that they also criticized China for suppressing Uyghurs in Xinjiang and other Muslim minorities. But it did not answer a question about human rights abuses in Xinjiang. In contrast, the AI chatbot gave detailed answers about the social situation in the U.S., saying the country has come under criticism over racial discrimination, wealth inequality, criminal justice, immigration, women's rights, and gun violence. The bot did not answer questions about Falun Gong, a spiritual group that has suffered brutal persecution in China since 1999. Millions of its practitioners in China have been thrown in jail and tortured, and an unclear number have been killed, some through having their organs harvested. Gemini said it couldn't answer a question about forced organ harvesting in China. Not all answers echo Beijing's talking points. Asked about Taiwan, Gemini gave a factual summary during our test, though it falsely stated that Japan and Australia maintain diplomatic ties with both Taiwan and China. But in reality, both countries recognize Beijing instead of Taiwan.
The Chinese Communist Party sees Taiwan as part of China, despite never having ruled the island. Most countries recognize Beijing and keep unofficial ties with Taiwan. Asking the same questions of the English version of the chatbot returned more accurate answers.
Experts told VOA that it's possible the issue was caused by Google using data from the Chinese internet to train its AI language models, where sensitive topics are heavily censored. A Google spokesperson told NTD that Gemini is built as a productivity tool and may not always be reliable.
Google said the results reflect sources published in simplified Chinese, the majority of which are published in mainland China. Adding, the Google team is working on improving the product. Now, before we go to our break, we'd like to share an announcement. NTD's original documentary, Hollywood Takeover: China's Control in the Film Industry, is coming to the big screen in New York City this Saturday.
It will screen at the Manhattan Film Festival on June 15th at 1 p.m. Here's a preview.
Is it really just about money? Are there other parts at stake?
Chinese influence was playing into what we see in U.S. films.
China said, you can't have that in there. And Hollywood listened.
This is insane.
And we all know that their goal is global domination.
People have been brainwashed without knowing it.
That's this Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Manhattan Film Festival.
Don't miss it. Use the link down below to get your tickets.
And still to come, what will it take to turn the temperature down on college campuses? Lawmakers want to know amid the rise in anti-Semitic incidents and the war in Gaza. More just after this break.
My baby's back from the West Coast.
Here are those pictures that you asked for your school project? First day of school, cute as a button.
So long ago.
Oh, here's Grandma Florence after that flood wiped out the whole neighborhood.
Sometimes I just cannot believe all the storms we've gone through here.
I can only hope that we'll be able to leave this house to you one day, baby. You're our legacy.
Planning for these disasters will make sure we're safe. And it's the best way to protect that legacy.
Those beans smell heavenly.
Give Mom a little credit.
You know what? We should make an emergency communication plan. That way we're ready this year.
Great
At
idea.
my dorm, we have emergency kits for earthquakes and wildfires, but I'm sure there's something more local I can send you with the link.
Okay. Smart. I'm coming to stay with you guys.
Protect your legacy. Plan for natural disasters today. Visit ready.gov/plan.
The glory of piano masterpieces from the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods. New Tang Dynasty Television invites you to join the 2024 NTD International Piano Competition. Together, we preserve and revitalize the art of authentic classical piano music. October 14th to the 19th at the Kaufman Music Center in New York City. Apply now at piano.ntdtv.com.
I remember being back in medical school where it was almost a depressing conception of the brain. We're born with so many neurons that peak like around 20, and then it's just a downhill decline from there. But today, we are going to debunk this old way of thinking and use a new technology called the functional MRI PET scanner to show that the brain can be rewired to function much better. Caused an almost immediate change, and by better, I mean improved focus, longer attention span, better mood, decreased risk of developing dementia, and an overall better life. So get ready to be surprised and even amazed. This is really exciting information as we explore what is possible, as we talk to thought leaders in the field. I needed to make sure I'm really that guy, okay. See the cutting edge tools they are using to assess the brain and hear from real patients about their dramatic healing process.
That's good.
Is that time yet?
It's time.
Let's start time for dinner.
Oh, it's really good.
Pasta dinner.
Donating pet food is one of the many ways you can help families in your community. Pets and people belong together. Learn more at petsandpeopletogether.org.
Want to know what's really happening around the world? Join us for a deep dive discussion with our expert panel on International Reporters Roundtable.
Welcome back. Over in Los Angeles, reports of Gaza war protesters at California State University on Wednesday barricading a building, trapping the school's president in her office. That's according to local ABC7.
And today, House lawmakers want to know more about what they're calling the crisis on campus and how university leaders managed to respond to anti-Semitic actions in recent months. Let's tune in.
Yet Trump could not bring himself to treat neo-Nazis and the KKK any differently than Vladimir Putin. Never a genuine word of criticism. Even today, our colleagues had to push back this very hearing in order to meet with the former president, who very recently said that Jews, like our former colleague Ted Deutsch, who don't vote for him, quote, hate their religion and hate Israel. I think we need a broad concept of what anti-Semitism is and that it applies there also. I also reject the opposition and the attacks that have occurred on and off campuses to the very concept of a democratic Jewish state, which I support. There were no Palestinian martyrs on October 7th, only murderers and rapists. Our hope, though, of saving the lives of innocent Palestinian women and children is diminished by every protest that can be discredited as anti-Semitic and every action that drives our neighbors away instead of causing more of them to recognize the true nature of the catastrophe that is ongoing today that results from Netanyahu's indiscriminate bombing and unwillingness to facilitate essential humanitarian aid to the Gazan people. In confronting rising anti-Semitism, we need equal concern about rising Islamophobia and hateful acts against Muslims, blaming the innocent for what they did not cause. I believe in policies and practices that protect all individuals, Jewish and Muslim, from hate and discrimination. This includes robust reporting mechanisms for anti-Semitic and Islamophobic incidents, comprehensive anti-bias training, as you've urged today, and a zero tolerance on hate speech and discrimination. Anti-Semitism should not be weaponized as a way to attack those of us who disagree with the policies of Israel's ultra-right government, and specifically with the self-serving actions of Netanyahu and his partner Ben-Gvir. Such misapplication only demeans the term anti-Semitic. And today, one of our Republican witnesses is here to take the misuse of anti-Semitism a step further by arguing that, quote, a main contributor to the new left anti-Semitism is atmospheric, the radical diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI ideology. Such claims not only misconstrue diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also basically pit one minority group against another. DEI responds to decades of systematic exclusion of people of color from higher education in states like mine in Texas. It seeks to create a culture of respect and understanding for all. Both communities of color and Jewish Americans are all too familiar with the very real prejudice that they've endured. Shared mistreatment has often united them to stand up together against injustice. With the University of Texas at Austin yielding to legislative pressure to shutter the Multicultural Engagement Center, we lost a home away from home, as many students describe it. It is a center where, as Congressman Deutsch has suggested, there ought to be a place to educate about Jewish history and anti-Semitism. I don't say that every DEI program across the country has been without fault, but we should be finding common ground there. And it is a mystery to me why the Republican leadership here continues to refuse to permit a vote on Congressman Kathy Manning's H.R. 7921, Countering Anti-Semitism Act, to establish a national coordinator to oversee an interagency task force to counter anti-Semitism. It should have been approved long ago. We live in a time here in America and in the Middle East where neither side can appreciate the well-justified pain of the other. Together, we've got to seek to overcome the fear and the pain to promote more understanding and capitalize on the talents of all Americans. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all for being here today. It's amazing that we think we can have a meeting of the Ways and Means Committee to come together to try to figure out what the heck is wrong with what's going on in the world today. The seeds of hate are sown long before the freshman year. They're sown at home by mothers and fathers, grandmas and grandpas, aunts and uncles and families. When we don't teach our children early on that hate is wrong at any level and in any people at all, I am amazed that we think there's a political answer to a human problem. We can pass all the laws we can. That doesn't mean they can be enforced or that the people will even accept that that's a law that I have to follow. We're having a debate today, a political debate that goes far beyond politics. This is absolutely incredible that we think that somehow these seeds of hate that are sown at a very early age and then fanned as the child grows can be corrected by a law. It goes far deeper than that. I think it's appalling that we think we have to call a committee hearing to address something that's so fundamental in the raising of our children. We have destroyed the nuclear family with different government programs. We've encouraged people to not try to get better, to try to get more understanding, to try to become a better person, and we've tried to substitute a government-funded existence that is the worst thing to do to any human being. Ted, it's good to see you again. I got to tell you, I just lost a really good friend of mine not too long ago. We used to drive to high school together, and he was Jewish, and the things that he had to go through were absolutely appalling to me. We sit here today and think that a law can be passed to outlaw hate. And we know the drivers of most of this stuff that happens at our highest universities, it's funding. My gosh, we can't lose that stream of funding, so let's try to accommodate that. No, what we need to do is quit accommodating the type of behavior that we're seeing taking place, not just here in America, but around the world. It is absolutely appalling that human beings can look at each other and hate each other for something that they believe in. I wish there was a law, and there is a law from a much higher source than men can do on their own. I have no questions of you other than to say, thank you for taking a time out of your life to come here again to talk to people who love to turn in everything into a political answer as opposed to common decency. If it doesn't start at home, you can't expect it to grow. And if it's not supported by mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, grandmas and grandpas, and neighbors, why do we wonder that we see these things happen by people who are in the highest places of education and say, how can they be so filled with hate? And how can we sit back and think that somehow we're going to pass a law that changes that? The law we need to pass is your mom and dad.
And before we head to break, if you have any feedback, please email us at news.today@ntd.com.
Stay with us. We'll have more stories in just a moment.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50 enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. Try America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
What if you could whiten your teeth by simply brushing your teeth? Now you can with Smile Actives, the teeth whitening breakthrough that safely gets your teeth white and keeps them white every day, just by brushing your teeth.
I never thought that whitening my teeth could be so easy. I just put the gel on the brush, the toothpaste on it, brush, and I can see my white teeth.
Simply add Smile Actives to any toothpaste and our patented PolyClean technology activates into a powerful microfoam that penetrates into the enamel surface to safely lift and remove stains.
You need a simple way to whiten your teeth. Without strips, without trays, without going to the dentist. And it was about time that a product was developed that you would be able to do that with just brushing.
And now Smile Actives is even better with new Pro Whitening Gel with 33% greater whitening power, clinically shown to whiten teeth faster, up to 8 shades. 100% of users saw whiter teeth. On food stains, coffee and wine stains, even on veneers, crowns, and dentures.
I eat the blueberries, I drink the coffee, and I know that Smile Actives will keep my teeth white every day.
If you could use something so easy like Smile Actives to take yellow teeth to white teeth, why wouldn't you?
Why spend hundreds of dollars for whitening treatments at the dentist when now you can whiten your teeth with new Smile Actives Pro Whitening Gel every time you brush your teeth? Call or go to smileactives.com and for a limited time get new Pro Whitening Gel for just $24.95. Order in the next 5 minutes and buy one, get one absolutely free for just $24.95. That's 2 for 1 and save 58%. We'll even include free shipping. Get your teeth whiter guaranteed or return it within 60 days for your money back.
I smile every day now.
The difference is literally night and day.
So now I'm always smiling, always choosing, because now my teeth are much whiter.
This offer is not available in stores, so call or click now before the special buy one, get one free offer goes away.
Welcome to NTD News Today.
Here are today's top stories.
House lawmakers examine Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecution of former President Trump. Watch part of the hearing unfolding in the House Judiciary Committee.
A unanimous Supreme Court today ruled that the FDA's decision to give women easier access to the abortion pill will remain in place. NTD's Arlene Richards has the details.
President Biden arriving at the G7 summit in Italy, where he's pushing for frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. More on a new security agreement between the U.S. and Ukraine, and the latest on U.S. sanctions targeting China and Russia.
Boeing's manufacturing processes and production quality in the spotlight. A Senate hearing is examining the FAA's oversight of the airplane maker.
Russian prosecutors have announced that American journalist Evan Gershkovich will stand trial for spying charges. He's been detained for over a year now.
The Chinese premier is paying New Zealand a visit. This is the highest official exchange between China and New Zealand in 7 years as they seek to deepen trade ties.
And Wimbledon has announced a record prize pot of £50 million this year. This announced by the All England Lawn Tennis Club on Thursday.
This is NTD News Today, live from our NTD Global Headquarters. Here are Stephania Cox and Chris Beers.
Hi, I'm Kevin Hogan, sitting in for Chris Beers today.
To begin the show, is former President Trump's New York criminal case politically motivated?
A House hearing is underway to examine Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg's prosecution.
District Attorney Alvin Bragg's decision to pursue charges against former President Trump for alleged violations of federal campaign finance laws marks a significant deviation from this established legal framework. By doing so, Bragg has effectively usurped the jurisdiction that this Congress has explicitly reserved for federal authorities. This overreach sets a troubling precedent for the politicization of legal proceedings at the state level. The danger here lies in the disparate enforcement standards that torture well-established federal law processes.
The FEC commissioner said it's perplexing that the Justice Department did not intervene in this case because the Manhattan DA has overstepped federal jurisdiction.
Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee argued that Bragg opened the door for politically motivated prosecutions of federal officials by rogue prosecutors.
Some witnesses, including the Attorney General of Missouri, agreed. They argued that Bragg used a novel and untested legal theory to upgrade the charges against Trump to felonies.
The Manhattan DA is set to testify before the same committee on July 12th. That would be one day after Trump's scheduled sentencing in the New York criminal case. In a unanimous decision, the Supreme Court today ruled that the pro-life plaintiffs don't have standing to challenge the Food and Drug Administration's decision to expand access to the abortion pill mifepristone. Justice Brett Kavanaugh delivered the opinion of the court, with Justice Clarence Thomas concurring. We turn now to our legal correspondent, Arlene Richards, for more details. Arlene, thank you for joining us here. This case is not about abortion. It relates more to access to the abortion pill, but the debate in this case is focused more on who can challenge the FDA's new rules, right?
Right. So it's not directly about abortion. It's more about who is able to or allowed to say that the FDA went beyond its authority in 2016 and 2021 when it made it easier to obtain and access mifepristone. So one of the questions is, can it be doctors who say that they might at some point have to treat somebody who has a rare side effect to mifepristone? Is it nonprofit organizations who advocate against abortion? And today, the Supreme Court has said that neither of those groups has standing to challenge what the FDA did. In their ruling, the court said, quote, because plaintiffs do not prescribe or use mifepristone, plaintiffs are unregulated parties who seek to challenge FDA's regulation of others.
Now, one of the arguments the plaintiffs made is that if they can't sue the FDA, then nobody can. And the court rejected that argument. What would a person have to establish in order to have standing to sue?
So Justice Kavanaugh explained that in the opinion. He said this can all be found in Article 3 of the Constitution. They say that first, the plaintiff has to be someone who has actually suffered an injury, such as a pregnant woman who took the pill and experienced complications. Second, the person has to be able to trace the injury back to the pill or the FDA's decision to loosen its rules. And finally, the injury has to be something that can be remedied by judicial intervention. Now, the court says that by requiring the plaintiff to actually have an injury, it screens out people who only have a general legal, moral, or policy objection, like the plaintiffs in this case.
So just 2 years ago this month, that's when Roe was overturned, and these drugs used in these abortions have become in the spotlight ever since here. And just to recap, what were the plaintiffs in this case challenging?
So as I said earlier, they thought that it was wrong that the FDA went beyond its authority when it made it easier for women to get access to this pill. So they were challenging, if you could just move this up a little further so I can, right, there we go. So how women get access to the pill. So for example, before the pandemic, women had to schedule 3 in-person doctor's appointments before they could get a prescription. And that prescription was managed by the physician. That rule was relaxed first in 2016 because the FDA deemed the drug safe to terminate pregnancies up to 10 weeks. And previously it was 7 weeks. They reduced the in-person visits to only 1, and they permitted other types of healthcare providers to prescribe the pill, such as nurse practitioners. Then during the pandemic, they relaxed the rule even further so that women could have a telehealth appointment. And in 2021, the FDA announced that women no longer had to have an in-person visit. So now that the Supreme Court has ruled women can continue to get the pill through the mail without physician supervision and without having to see their doctor. So first, although they may still be required to have the telehealth visit.
Right, and these doctors that were bringing the challenge were not the ones that were prescribing mifepristone in the first place anyway.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. NTD's legal correspondent Arlene Richards, thank you.
Thank you.
Former President Trump and key advisors to President Biden will present their differing economic visions today. The discussions will occur in conversations with America's top business leaders.
Trump is addressing the Business Roundtable at their Washington, D.C. headquarters. Biden's White House chief of staff spoke to the same group, over 200 CEOs. That's on behalf of the president, who's in Italy at the G7 meeting.
At 12:30 p.m., Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen speaking at the Economic Club of New York, discussing expanding the economy's productive capacity.
Trump has also met with House Republicans and had lunch with Senate Republicans today.
Republicans hope these visits will help unify their divided caucuses in the Senate and House as the November elections approach.
We just concluded a very successful special political conference with our special guest, President Donald J. Trump. He was warmly welcomed by the House Republican Conference. We are 100% unified behind his candidacy and are ready to get to work on behalf of the American people.
There is something happening in the country. That's the phrase I used to introduce the president this morning, and he repeated the phrase a number of times in his own remarks because he's feeling and seeing that as well. People recognize right now in this country that this will be the most consequential election, certainly of our lifetimes and probably maybe in the last century or more in America. Everything is at stake.
The Supreme Court is postponing a decision on voting rules until September 30th. That's likely too late to impact the November 5th elections. Republicans are challenging President Biden's voter registration order. Pennsylvania lawmakers, led by House member Don Kiefer, argue the executive order oversteps federal authority and infringes on state rights.
The order mandates all federal agencies assist in voter registration and participation efforts.
A federal district court dismissed the lawmakers' initial lawsuit, stating they lacked standing. An appeal is pending in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals.
Critics argue the order benefits Biden's campaign, while supporters claim it promotes voter participation. The ACLU and immigration advocacy groups are suing President Biden over his new border directive. They say the administration does not have the authority to override Congress and bar asylum seekers from entering the country.
An ACLU attorney said Biden's executive action is legally indistinguishable from former President Trump's ban, which the ACLU successfully blocked. The lawsuit says Biden's directive violates existing federal law. It says the 1980 Refugee Act enshrines a commitment to sheltering refugees seeking to escape persecution.
Under the order, immigrants crossing the border illegally are barred from seeking asylum. This restriction applies while the number of daily crossings between ports of entry is at a 7-day average of 2,500. Recent safety incidents involving Boeing planes have heightened concerns over aviation safety. A Senate hearing this morning is examining the Federal Aviation Administration's oversight of Boeing.
There must be a fundamental shift in the company's safety culture in order to holistically address its quality and safety challenges. This is about systemic change, and there's a lot of work to be done. Our goal is to make sure Boeing implements the necessary changes and has the right tools in place to sustain those changes in the long term.
The Senate Commerce Committee hearing examines the FAA's oversight of Boeing's aircraft manufacturing processes and production quality.
Boeing submitted a comprehensive plan to the FAA on May 30th as the agency requested. The plan aims to address Boeing's quality control following safety incidents earlier this year.
The hearing examines the FAA's assessment of the plan. It also covers oversight of Boeing's planned response to the recent FAA audits. And on Capitol Hill today, the Senate has hit a roadblock on a Supreme Court ethics bill. Senator Lindsey Graham objected to passing the proposed act without a formal vote, calling it an unconstitutional reach. Democrats have been calling for changes to the nation's highest court since Roe v. Wade was overturned in 2022, expressing concerns about Justices Thomas and Alito's impartiality. This due to non-disclosed gifts received from Republican donors and other issues.
Democrats want Alito recused from Trump-related cases. Republicans argue there's no evidence of bias.
The bill aims to establish a complaint against justices and enforce greater transparency.
It would empower a panel of lower court judges to investigate complaints against the justices and order disciplinary actions.
Continuing with Supreme Court ethics, House Democrats are proposing a $50 limit on gifts for justices, aiming to tackle what they call an ethics crisis.
During a Democratic roundtable on Tuesday, Representative Jamie Raskin criticized what he called the court's low ethical standards, joined by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
The event, titled High Court, Low Standards and Dark Money, highlighted concerns about justices' conduct. This comes after revelations of substantial gifts to Justices Clarence Thomas and Ketanji Brown Jackson.
The two lawmakers argued the court's current code lacks enforcement. They have also postponed creating an independent ethics office for the court. The University of California in LA is set to receive a new chancellor. Dr. Julio Frank will take over the role. He's a global health expert and current president of the University of Miami.
Current Chancellor Gene Block is stepping down on July 31st. Block came under fire over the university's response to a pro-Palestinian encampment and other protests.
Dr. Frank's father and grandfather were Jews who fled Germany in the 1930s to Mexico.
He said that we're at a critical moment in higher education and acknowledged that some people have lost trust in higher education institutions.
He's set to take over his new role on January 1st. An interim chancellor will serve in the post until then. More updates are coming in about the conflicts in the Middle East. Tensions are flaring up in the north of Israel. The Hezbollah terrorist group in Lebanon fired some 40 rockets at northern Israel.
Hezbollah said the attacks targeted 9 Israeli military sites, including the headquarters of Israel's Northern Command. The attack involved Hezbollah's largest drone offensive to date in the 8-month war.
This was the second consecutive day of retaliation by Hezbollah over Israel's killing of its senior commander on Tuesday.
Israel said numerous rockets were intercepted, 2 people were treated for mild injuries, and crews are working to extinguish at least 10 fires, adding that Hezbollah, Lebanon, and Iran are fully responsible for tensions flaring.
Meanwhile, in the Aden Sea, a merchant vessel was hit by 2 suspected projectiles from the Houthis in Yemen. A fire erupted on board.
And up ahead, a Democrat-backed Supreme Court ethics bill is blocked in the Senate. More on the bill, which aims to establish a complaint system against justices.
On Wednesday, testifying at Senator Bob Menendez's bribery trial was New Jersey's top federal prosecutor.
And in response to Governor Kathy Hochul's freeze on the nation's first congestion pricing scheme, New York City's comptroller and community organizers and activists have promised to take legal action. More in just a moment here on NTD News Today.
The shining gem of New England. This delightful seaside city of Newport is one of the most beautiful places in the state. Today, we bring you here as we meet with our friends and fellow musicians from the Hermitage Piano Trio. As a team, they have garnered multiple Grammy Award nominations with their breathtaking performances.
Oh, wow, I did not think this instrument can make that sound, right?
The pandemic made this reunion even more special.
Three of us, we like it because we feel music the same way, so...
Don't miss us on the next episode of Piano Talks.
We all know that words have power. They set things in motion
and make us happy or sad.
But there's one word that stands out because when people say it, lives are changed.
It's not a big word. It's itsy bitsy.
It's only 3 little letters.
But when you say it, the life of a kid like me can be changed.
So, what is this special word?
It may surprise you.
It's yes.
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 Yes to becoming a monthly supporter of Shriners Hospitals for Children.
That's right. Your monthly support allows the doctors and nurses at Shriners Hospitals for Children to give the most amazing care anywhere and change the lives of kids like me.
And me.
And me. Because people like you have said yes. Now I can play football.
And I can play catch. And I can walk.
So what do you say? Will you say yes right now?
It's so easy.
All you have to do is pick up the phone or go to loveshriners.org right now and say yes. When you say yes to giving just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day, we'll send you this adorable Love to the Rescue blanket as a reminder of all the kids you're helping every day. My life is filled with possibility because of the monthly support of people just like you who called the number on your screen and said yes.
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 Your yes is making a difference in my life and the lives of so many other kids like me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving.
Please call or go online now. If operators are busy, call again or go to loveshriners.org to say yes right away.
We're in the nation's capital asking the important questions so that you're in the know. Join us daily, Monday through Friday, on the Capitol Report on NTD News.
Welcome back. The nation's largest oil trade group is suing the Biden administration over its emissions reduction regulations. It would also impact Biden's push for electric vehicle manufacturing. The Environmental Protection Agency issued new tailpipe emissions rules in March. The rules force U.S. automakers to produce and sell more electric vehicles. The Biden administration projects up to 56% of all car sales will be electric between 2030 and 2032. The American Petroleum Institute says the rule exceeds the agency's authority. The regulation will eliminate most new gas cars and traditional hybrids from the U.S. market in less than a decade. The Institute's senior vice president says the lawsuit aims to protect American consumers, auto plant workers, and energy security. The National Corn Growers Association and the American Farm Bureau Federation will join the lawsuit. The two groups rely on gas-powered cars to support the corn ethanol industry. New Jersey's top federal prosecutor testified yesterday at Senator Bob Menendez's bribery trial. He says the lawmaker sought to discuss the prosecution of a New Jersey real estate developer before recommending him to the post.
Senator, what do you think about your friend U.S. Attorney Selinger's testimony from today?
Very transparent. Nothing inappropriate was asked of him. He wouldn't have accepted anything inappropriate. He didn't do anything inappropriate. More of a witness for us than them.
This was the second law enforcement figure who said Menendez sought to speak about a criminal case affecting a New Jersey businessman.
Prosecutors say Menendez tried to intervene in criminal cases to reward businessmen who bribed him with gold bars, cash, and a car.
Prosecutors allege the senator recommended Selinger as a U.S. attorney because he believed he could be influenced. They say Menendez was trying to protect a longtime friend who was facing criminal charges. And on Capitol Hill, Microsoft President Brad Smith is testifying before a House panel on Homeland Security today. The company's security practices are under scrutiny after Russian and Chinese hackers breached its systems over the past year. China-linked hackers stole 60,000 State Department emails last year by breaking into the tech giant's systems. A Russian group spied on Microsoft's senior staff emails earlier this year as well.
In April, the Cyber Safety Review Board criticized Microsoft for its lack of transparency over the Chinese hack. The board said the intrusion had been preventable.
Microsoft launched a new cybersecurity initiative last November. The company said it took the measure against the increasing scale and high stakes of cyber attacks.
Lawmakers will examine Microsoft's security lapses and plans for improvements. Activists are promising to take legal action in response to New York Governor Kathy Hochul's freeze on the city's congestion pricing scheme. The initiative is the first of its kind in the U.S. Commuters entering Manhattan below 60th Street would have faced a $15 toll starting June 30th. The New York City's controller and activists claim that the toll would have raised $1 billion for the Metropolitan Transit Authority. Earlier this month, the governor announced an indefinite pause on the policy. Opponents say the hiatus will harm disabled New Yorkers and those with respiratory conditions. The congestion pricing tolls were meant to alleviate heavy traffic and reduce emissions. The plan would also finance upgrades to the subway system.
Climate protesters disrupted the annual Congressional baseball game yesterday. The activists ran onto the field wearing white T-shirts with the phrase "End fossil fuels." At least 8 protesters interrupted the charity game. A police officer caught up with them and escorted them off the field.
According to the Capitol Police, 8 people are being charged for interfering with a member of the U.S. Capitol Police.
In a post on social media platform X, a group called Climate Defiance said that some of its members had gone onto the field to protest the Chevron-sponsored game.
Other protesters who were holding a Palestinian flag were escorted out of the bleachers. Dads in Congress are coming together to advocate for policies ahead of Father's Day. Called the Dads Caucus, the group is the brainchild of California Congressman Jimmy Gomez.
Dads are more involved in parenting than ever before, and they want to be able to put their families first. Unfortunately, that's not an option for every parent. Millions of our constituents are forced to choose between their paychecks and taking care of their children.
Gomez started the Congressional Dads Caucus last year when his son Hodge was a baby.
The group says it advocates for a national paid leave program, affordable and accessible child care, and expanding the child tax credit.
According to the dads, these initiatives have proved their effectiveness in addressing child poverty and helping families. The Rose fire burning in Wickenburg has forced some of the residents to evacuate. The fire has also forced the shutdown of US 60 in both directions in the area. According to the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management, the fire has burned more than 200 acres and has not been contained.
Officials announced that 6 buildings have been burned. About 100 homes are at risk.
Local authorities are advising residents to have an emergency bag prepared.
And for the evacuation, those who live on the west side of US 60 need to evacuate to the Wickenburg Community Center, and those who live on the east side of the highway need to evacuate to Morristown. Dashcam footage from the Virginia State Police shows the moment a trooper was hit in a chain reaction crash this week. We just want to warn you before watching, some might find this disturbing.
It starts with a sedan stopped on Interstate 495 in Annandale that refused to move. As the trooper responded, a Jeep hit a tractor trailer that was stopped because the sedan was blocking the lane.
The Jeep spun into the trooper's patrol car, hitting the sedan and the officer. The trooper got right back up and appeared to not have serious injuries. Officials say the sedan driver suffered minor injuries.
She was charged with a DUI, as well as possession of an illegal substance, obstruction, improperly stopping on a highway, and refusal of a blood or breath test. The Jeep driver was also charged with a DUI. And still to come, a new $50 billion loan to Ukraine, how it's connected to Russia. And Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni says the G7 is not a fortress, but an offer of values to the world. The latest on the G7 summit.
Some NATO and EU officials are trying to combat Russian spy activity, what they say about diplomats allegedly planning acts of sabotage.
And intelligence agencies are on watch, tracking foreign election interference. More in just a moment, coming up.
大提琴不仅仅是一件乐器，它是有生命、有感情的，需要我们精心的照顾。往往我们一个小小的动作，可能都会对人情绪产生微妙的影响。天音的品牌是福星，我们对于传统的理念很荣幸被神韵艺术团选为指定供应商。时间是酿造音色的不可替代的陪伴。我跟大提琴已经有60多年的友情了，每一把琴都有它自己的个性，熟悉它，才能真正发挥它的潜力。所以，我希望给你的每一把琴，都是首先我所信任的。
The 2024 NTD 9th International Chinese Vocal Competition is scheduled to take place at Merkin Hall, Kaufman Music Center in New York from September 18th to 21st. The competition specially invites vocalists from the world-famous Shenyun Performing Arts to serve as judges. The prestigious Gold Award is $10,000. Chinese vocal artists aged 18 to 50 are welcome to register.
Hi there again. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin is in Brussels trying to secure a more organized approach to aid for Ukraine. He's meeting with other NATO defense ministers who are working on a new plan for long-term assistance.
This is a critical moment. The stakes of this war are high, and Ukraine's survival is on the line, but so is all of our security. None of us would want to live in a world where Putin prevails. We would all be less secure if tyrants think that they can trample borders and cow their neighbors.
NATO members want to provide long-term security and assistance and military training to Ukraine. It would partly use NATO's command structure and take funds from its common budget.
The chances of an agreement improved after Hungary promised not to veto the plans. That's as long as it's not forced to take part.
This week marks NATO's last high-level gathering before President Biden hosts a summit in Washington next month.
NATO's Secretary General says he hopes members at the U.S. summit will agree to maintain current funding levels for Ukraine aid. He estimates that's over $40 billion worth of equipment each year.
And Russian prosecutors have announced they sent the case of detained U.S. reporter Evan Gershkovich to court. They concluded he had been collecting information for the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency about a Russian tank factory. On March 29, 2023, Gershkovich was arrested in Tyrol's region of charges of espionage. The FSB security agency, the main successor agency to the KGB, said it had caught him, quote, red-handed, trying to obtain military secrets.
Gershkovich and his employer, the Wall Street Journal, have denied the charges. The newspaper has repeatedly called for his immediate release.
The White House called the charges ridiculous, with President Biden describing the detention as totally illegal.
It was not announced when the case would be heard or whether the trial would be closed to the public, as is common in such cases.
And now we have some short headlines from Italy, Spain, and other European countries. NATO members are set to take tougher action against Russian spies. That's in response to a campaign of hostile activities by Moscow. NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg says they've seen acts of sabotage, arson attempts, cyber attacks, and more.
NATO officials are now discussing options to respond. This includes the protection of critical maritime and cyber infrastructure.
Meanwhile, 8 EU foreign ministers say Russian diplomats should not be allowed to move freely around the bloc. They say they should be restricted to countries where they're accredited.
The ministers say propaganda and even the preparation of acts of sabotage are the main workloads for many Russian diplomats.
The European Court of Justice today ordered Hungary to pay a fine of over $200 million and a further $1 million for every day it does not comply with the bloc's asylum rules.
The court had ruled in 2020 that Hungary failed to follow the bloc's policies on immigration. Hungary has taken a hard stance since Europe's immigration crisis began almost 10 years ago. It erected border fences and forcefully tried to stop many from entering.
A spokesperson for Hungary's prime minister condemned today's ruling. He says it's contrary to EU law and incompatible with his country's constitution. A brawl broke out in Italy's parliament yesterday. One lawmaker appeared injured and left the chamber in a wheelchair.
The lawmaker tried to hand a flag to another member of parliament when the brawl broke out. This happened during a discussion on a bill concerning local autonomies.
Amid the chaos, another person tried throwing punches at the lawmaker with the flag.
The lawmaker fell to the ground multiple seconds later. He was taken to the hospital and says he'll sue his attacker.
Torrential rains continued to fall on many parts of Spain yesterday. A video shows flooded streets in Murcia, a city in the southeastern part of the country.
Just a few cars navigated through the downpour and gusts of wind. On Tuesday, planes were grounded on flooded runways at Palma de Mallorca Airport.
Spanish firefighters rescued a driver with mobility issues whose car was trapped in raging floodwaters. 3 fire engines and a helicopter were deployed for the operation.
The driver was eventually whisked away by helicopter unharmed.
Greek authorities have released the identity of an American tourist who went missing from the island of Amorgos. 59-year-old Albert Calabit has not been seen or heard from since going for a long walk on Tuesday.
Amorgos' deputy mayor of tourism says Calabit has been coming to the island almost every year for 10 years. A large search and rescue operation is underway. Greece right now is in the midst of a blistering heat wave.
Think twice before reaching for those instant noodles. Food authorities in Denmark have recalled nearly 3 types of the spicy treat imported from South Korea. This over possible risks of acute poisoning.
The noodles are made by Seoul-based Samyang Foods, one of South Korea's largest companies. The recalled noodles include spicy and hot chicken and hot chicken stew.
The Danish authorities say the products contain an overly high dose of capsaicin. That's an active ingredient in chili peppers, but also a chemical that can be a neurotoxin and a health hazard.
Officials say children and teenagers in Denmark have been daring each other on social media to eat the 3 South Korean products. Samyang says the steps taken in Denmark were not based on product quality issues, but on local authorities thinking that the products were too spicy.
President Biden talking with G7 leaders in Italy as he's pushing for frozen Russian assets to help Ukraine. He's also set to sign a new security agreement with Ukraine.
Joining us now live is our White House correspondent Iris Tao, who's in Italy. Iris, what's the latest there?
Good afternoon to both of you. So right now we're in Apulia, Italy, where President Biden is slated to hold a joint press conference with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. And together the two leaders will announce a 10-year security agreement that will pledge America's long-term support for Ukraine. Here's the White House talking about that agreement earlier. Watch.
Leaders will sign a bilateral security agreement, making clear our support will last long into the future and pledging continued cooperation, particularly in the defense and security space.
The White House told us earlier today that the G7 leaders are now on the cusp of reaching an agreement to send Ukraine a $50 billion loan using interest generated by frozen Russian assets. A senior administration official told us that such a method will make Russia, instead of taxpayers, fill the financial gap that Ukraine is now facing. The official added that countries have floated many ideas before finding this one, and this one would respect every jurisdiction of law. But Russia today said that doing so would be criminal, adding that it would lead to a response from Moscow that will be very painful for the European Union. Meanwhile, President Biden, speaking earlier today at the G7 summit, said it shows that democracies are delivering and that democracies can together contribute to the world. Watch.
And I would strongly hope we can keep up the momentum. Let's keep finding opportunities to invest in quality physical, digital, and energy infrastructure. Let's keep partnering with each other and the private sector, with the World Bank, with countries around the world to mobilize even more capital. To go from billions, we have to get to the trillions that are needed. And that's what's going to be needed to close this infrastructure gap. And at this inflection point, let's forge a better future together, because I'm confident we can do it.
And leaders at the G7 summit will also talk about China's unfair trade practices and the support for Russia's war machine. And of course, we're going to hear more from President Biden on these issues in just less than 2 hours. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Iris Tao. And of course, U.S. forces defending Ukraine is not in this, so I really do appreciate your update from Italy. Intelligence agencies say they are closely tracking attempts to influence U.S. elections from foreign sources. They're watching for deepfakes and other false information. Whether or not the public will know about any election interference attempts would be up to intelligence agency heads. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence, or ODNI, says it would depend on if the disinformation was serious enough to change the outcome of the election. Lawmakers have been concerned that new technology and divisions in American society would overwhelm any defense against election interference. ODNI says Russia is seen as the primary threat to the upcoming election. It also identified China and Iran as sources of threats. Officials say intelligence analysts have seen more potential cases of foreign election interference in the past few months than in the last 4 or 5 years.
The highest level visit between China and New Zealand in 7 years. Today, the Chinese Premier Li Qiang is visiting the country. The two nations signed agreements on trade, human rights, and climate. New Zealand seeks more economic cooperation with China despite security concerns and China's tensions with the U.S. Here's that story.
China is New Zealand's largest export market. The country is seeking to increase trade with Beijing despite concerns over foreign interference.
We've been pretty upfront about foreign interference. Our head of our intelligence agencies have been through the public sessions and annual reviews, been very open and public and transparent about that. You saw myself a few months ago call out cyber attack on New Zealand's parliamentary systems, and we call that out, and we'll continue to do that. We've got no tolerance for foreign interference from any country.
New Zealand is not a U.S. ally, but the two share a close strategic partnership. Both are members of the Five Eyes, an intelligence sharing alliance. The Chinese primer promised visa-free travel for New Zealanders, and New Zealand agreed to support more Confucius institutes in the country. The U.S. and the U.K. have both warned these institutes could serve as Beijing's footholds to influence education and as a tool to spy on Chinese students studying abroad. Outside the hotel where China's senior official is staying, both protesters and supporters gathered. Among the Chinese flags, a banner held by a protester read, "Where do China's transplant organs come from?" Investigators have uncovered evidence in China of live organ harvesting targeted detained faith groups and dissidents. Practitioners of Falun Dafa were seen in the crowd, urging the Chinese regime to end the nearly 25-year-old persecution of the spiritual practice in China.
Still to come, in the driest desert in the world and under clear skies, the largest astronomy camera will be installed by Chile.
Host nation Germany takes on Scotland at the Allianz Arena, the kickoff of the opener of a month-long tournament that is taking place in 10 different cities. We'll have more for you in just a moment here on NTD News Today.
I'm Ilka. I live with my daughter and with my grandchildren. There's a sense of comfort that comes with eating a good meal. We try to make the most, of what we have. We have rent to pay, and then there are lights and there are gas. And while my daughter and I both work, it still just doesn't seem like there's enough to go around sometimes.
Every day, millions of our neighbors face hunger, including 1 in 5 children, and food costs keep rising. Please call or go online right now to join Feeding America with your gift of just $19 a month, only 63 cents a day. Your monthly support can fill plates with nutritious food for families across the country and in your community, thanks to a nationwide network of food banks and volunteers.
If you were over and playing with us, you were part of our family and you were going to eat. A real cook can take nothing and make something.
No one should ever have to wonder if they will have enough to eat, and our neighbors are working hard to feed their families every day. Call or go online now. Visit helpfeedingamerica.org and give $19 a month. 98% of donations go directly to help millions of people facing hunger from coast to coast and in your own community. Use your credit card and you'll get this exclusive canvas grocery bag as a thank you for joining hands with people across America to help end hunger.
Some of the lessons that I hope that my family will take, it is important to treat people the way that you want to be treated. I have carried on the tradition of loving people through food.
Please call right now or go online to make a monthly gift at helpfeedingamerica.org. Your support helps our neighbors bring food home to their families.
I can remember being back in medical school where it was almost a depressing conception of the brain. We're born with so many neurons that peak like around 20, and then it's just a downhill decline from there. But today, we are going to debunk this old way of thinking and use a new technology called the functional MRI PET scanner to show that the brain can be rewired to function much better. It caused an almost immediate change, and by better, I mean improved focus, longer attention span, better mood, decreased risk of developing dementia, and an overall better life. So get ready to be surprised and even amazed. This is really exciting information as we explore what is possible, as we talk to thought leaders in the field. I needed to make sure I'm really that guy, okay. See the cutting edge tools they are using to assess the brain and hear from real patients about their dramatic healing process.
That's good. For the day's top headlines and the news you need to know, tune in right here to NTD Evening News.
Welcome back. IKEA is venturing into the video game world by hiring people to work as virtual employees in their new store in the game Roblox. Here's NTD's BJ Kong with more on this story.
The game you see on my screen right now is called Roblox, a popular online multiplayer game which will soon be the host of IKEA's next location, a virtual outlet which might look very similar to this fan-made version. But in order to run this store, IKEA is hiring players to work as virtual employees for real-life pay. IKEA's virtual store, which takes place inside their game called the Coworker game, will allow users to explore, inspect furniture, and even be served virtual Swedish meatballs. Meanwhile, employees will manage furniture displays, interact with numerous IKEA items, and even help serve at the food court while being compensated with a real-world wage of about £13 per hour, equivalent to around $16 an hour. According to a recent press release by the furniture chain, the game was created as part of a new hiring initiative entitled Careers Done Differently in order to attract a new generation of coworkers. IKEA says that employees will also play a series of games while on shift in order to introduce them to the breadth of roles and career progression routes available at IKEA, inspired by real-life jobs at the Swedish retailer. Qualifications to apply as a virtual employee require applicants to be over the age of 18 and live in the UK or Ireland. Applications opened on June 3rd and will be closed on the 16th, with the game officially launching on the 24th. BJ Kang, NTD News, California.
Under the skies of northern Chile, the world's largest astronomy camera will be installed on the edge of the Atacama Desert.
The largest digital camera ever built for optical astronomy is ready to be installed in Chile. It has a resolution beyond 3.2 gigapixels and weighs nearly 3 tons. The camera will carry out the ambitious task of an unprecedented decade-long exploration.
The camera, the LSST cam, or the camera that will go into the Vera Rubin Observatory, is in 2 ways a Guinness Book of World Records holders.
The Vera C. Rubin Observatory will sit on top of a summit on the edge of the Atacama Desert. The pieces required to assemble the camera had to travel in several vehicles to reach the location.
And everything that we needed for operations are now on the summit and ready for checkout and hopefully for installation a little bit later this year.
The goal of the exploration is to understand the nature of dark energy and dark matter in the universe. It will study the possibility of Earth colliding with asteroids or stars and planets close to the Sun.
At the end of the day, the material that we see and know around us only constitutes about 5% of the energy content in the universe. So Vera Rubin will really help us understand what really most of the universe is made of in general. And then there are a variety of other topics that we'll study.
Thanks to the clear skies of the Atacama Desert, which is the driest desert on Earth, Chile hosts most of the world's investments in astronomy.
With the Olympics coming up in Paris, Peruvian athlete Kimberly Garcia is preparing for the race of a lifetime.
The race-walking athlete is heading to the Paris Olympics. She's from Huaycayo, a city in the center of Peru, situated over 10,000 feet above sea level.
Peru has not won an Olympic medal in more than 3 decades, but Kimberly is hoping to change that.
I feel that now I am much more prepared, physically, psychologically, emotionally. I am much stronger. Then I think of the dream of winning an Olympic gold medal. I am about to fulfill it. I am quite sure of what I have been doing all this time, all these years that I have been working.
Kimberly has won 5 medals since 2021, including her double gold in Oregon and another team gold in Turkey in April.
Although she previously dropped out of a race in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, she says she feels more prepared than ever now.
Rafael Nadal will skip Wimbledon in July in order to prepare for the Olympic Games in Paris. The Spaniard has been far from his best after returning from injuries. The 38-year-old missed almost all of 2023 with a hip problem. A muscle tear had stalled his comeback earlier this year as well.
Nadal won an Olympic singles gold medal in 2008 and a doubles gold in 2016. He will team up with newly crowned French Open champion Carlos Alcaraz to play in the doubles at the Olympics.
A two-time champion at Wimbledon, Nadal said he would continue his preparation by playing at the ATP 250 clay court event in Sweden starting July 15th.
The Paris Olympics run from July 26th through August 11th. Wimbledon this year will have a record £50 million prize. That's about $64 million in dollars. The All England Lawn Tennis Club announced this today.
The total prize money fund for this year's championships will be £50 million, a very healthy increase of 11.9% or £5.3 million on 2023. The gentlemen's and ladies singles champions this year will each receive £2.7 million, an increase of £350,000 or 14.9% on last year.
Players who lose in the first round of singles will get $76,000 each.
The new chair of the All England Club said ticket demand has never been greater than it was this year. The grass court Grand Slam runs from July 1st to the 14th.
As host of the Euro 2024, Germany will play against Scotland on Friday to kick off the tournament. The country hopes the games will be a month-long party for visiting fans. The sound of bagpipes drifting down the roads, men in kilts on the streets of Munich. Scotland is in town and the excitement is ramping up ahead of the European Championship curtain raiser on Friday.
In contrast to the partying visitors, there is hardly a sighting of a German jersey or flag. The home fans are just going about their daily life.
At both of the previous World Cups, Germany went out at the group stage. And at Euro 2020, it was eliminated by England in round 16.
Even though its opponent has come on in leaps and bounds in recent years, being defeated by Scotland would nevertheless be a shock to Germany. We are quite busy in this day and age, but what if a moment we could just quiet down? But how? Let's get some tips from Gina Marie with Strong Mind and Body.
There's a saying, the quieter you become, the more you are able to hear. But for most of us, there's really a moment in the day when we stop moving and stop the noise. We're working, we're moving, we're driving, we're listening to things on our headphones, we're watching things. We're also filling up the little spaces by checking our phones. It's a human tendency to want to be busy and productive. We tend to want to fill every space with something useful or entertaining. So how do we become quiet? Here are a few ideas. Number 1, slow down for at least a few minutes physically. Refrain from moving around or doing tasks on your computer or phone. Just sit or come to some kind of stillness or slowness. Number 2, aim for meditation, prayer, or nature therapy. Go for a quiet walk in nature, sit watching the sunset, or lie in a hammock and just feel the breeze. Number 3, take a break from technology. At least for a few minutes, disconnect. Let go of reading or listening to. Just sit still or move slowly. Don't try to get anything done or consume anything. Number 4, let go of being productive or entertained. You don't need to achieve anything, prove anything, or be excited about anything. Let go of these kinds of compulsions even for a few minutes. Number 5, embrace boredom, loneliness, sadness, or helplessness. We do everything we can to avoid these feelings, but let's allow ourselves to feel however we feel. This gives us freedom. We are not meant to feel great all the time anyway. In closing, a few words of wisdom from Lao Tzu. In the stillness and quiet, you might just hear life's deeper message.
Before we wrap up, a heartwarming rescue. Earlier this week, a rescue team freed a 12-week-old puppy in Parker, Colorado. He'd been trapped in a townhouse vent for 3 hours. According to a post on the South Metro Fire Rescue's Facebook page, the puppy, named Archie Bean, fell through an open floor vent on the 3rd floor of the house.
He seems to have slipped through the uncovered vent after jumping from a bed.
The rescue operation included the Douglas County Sheriff's Department and home maintenance company Plumbline Services.
They used a small camera through a hole in the ductwork system to pinpoint the puppy's exact location. In order to reach the puppy, they had to drill a hole in the ceiling.
Wow, well worth it, I say. For round-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app.
And be sure to stick around for NTD Newsroom at 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll cover more stories from the U.S. and around the world.